All right, I'm thinking about getting us started. So anybody in the hallway who's going to participate might want to come in. Oh, look at that. Okay, do we have the ability to go live?
We are live.
Fantastic. We're live, but I need staff. They're coming. Here they come. Okay, at 5:02, I'm calling to order the Finance Committee for today, December 9th. This is our last meeting of the year, and we have a fairly lengthy agenda, so we're going to get right into it. If we could get a roll call, please.
Certainly, Madam Chair. Councillor Cassett.
Here.
Councillor Lindell. Councillor Faulkner is excused. Councillor Lee Garcia.
Present.
Chair Romero Worth.
I am here. From there, we have a quorum, so we're going to go on to approval of the agenda. Do we have any changes tonight to the agenda?
No,
Staff?
Madam Chair, no changes from staff.
Changes to the agenda? We're not on consent yet. Okay, if there are no changes, can I get a motion?
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the agenda. All those in favor, aye. Anybody opposed? Motion passes. On to approval of the consent agenda. I do believe we've had a number of things pulled for tonight. Director Oster, maybe you can take us through that, but would you wait 2 seconds while I get a pen? Okay, 2. There we go. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we have a total of 8 items pulled for discussion this evening, and we have a number of folks online as well. So just wanted to note that for everyone, that there are 9 people online to address presentations and some of these items.
Right, so they're not attendees, they're not members of the committee, they are people who are online to help walk us through some of the things that have been pulled.
That is correct, Madam Chair. The items that have been pulled for discussion this evening are item A, item H, item K, item X, item V, item Z, item D, and item K. I will read that list one more time because it's sort of a long.
Right, and so it's DD and KK, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
DD and KK.
Okay.
And so starting over from the top, item A, item H, item K, item X, item V, item Z, item D, and item KK. And those 2 with the double letters, those are the numbers in Civic Clerk.
Okay, are there other things the committee would like to hear? Councillor Lindell.
Item V.
V or B?
V is in Victor.
We did, the V is on the list.
Okay, I guess I heard it as B.
Okay.
sorry.
I do that in Spanish a lot.
I also pulled item Z.
Z, it's on the list.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Item Z and item X and Y all are of the same ilk. And I would like to be able to discuss all 3 of those.
Okay, so you said Y.
X, Y, Z.
I don't see Y on the list. So let's add Y.
Thank you.
Anything else? Councillor Cassett.
I also, I just pulled X, but X, Y, Z also for me are of the same ilk as Councillor Lindell put it, so. that would-
Okay, so we'll talk about those together. Anything else? And if not, is there a motion?
Move to approve as amended.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as amended. All those in favor, aye. Anybody opposed? That motion passes. All right, we have 3 presentations tonight. We're going to start with a finance staff recognition, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Director Oster.
Thank you so much, Chair Romero-Worth and members of the Finance Committee. This evening, it is my honor and my pleasure to recognize Josie Bolden. Josie, would you come join me at the podium? Josie is our controller. I'm not sure if you've appeared before Finance Committee before. It's my honor to introduce you to Josie
Welcome.
Bolden. We are recognizing Josie tonight for a number of reasons. One of them is that she has been an integral part in completing the FY22, FY23, and now FY24 audit. No joke, we would not be here today without Josie. Many hours of hard work. So I have a short bio for Josie that I'm going to read, and then we have a certificate to present to her. Josie has worked with the city since July of 2023. She brought with her over 17 years of diverse accounting experience. Her career has spanned utility load testing, corporate accounting, and governmental accounting. Along the way, she's worn many hats, including staff accountant, corporate accountant, accounting systems coordinator, and controller, all of which has given her a well-rounded perspective. And I can absolutely say that Josie's knowledge of our Munis accounting system, which is a system that she had used in a previous role, has really helped us make our use of the accounting features of Munis much more robust. And Josie is one of those unique accountants that understands the IT side of it too, which I'm not. So I rely heavily on Josie. So that's really awesome. We really appreciate that knowledge and that understanding that Josie brings to our team. Josie's professional mission centers on process improvement and efficiency. She likes to leverage technology. Like I mentioned, she's really good with the IT part of her work. She's looking to find ways to work smarter, not harder, which I think is just so critical in today's world, maximizing our use of technology so that we can accomplish all of the things that need to get done. She likes to think of herself as a tinkerer, someone who thrives on piecing processes together. Josie feels that there's nothing more rewarding than identifying the most efficient and accurate ways to record and manage transactions. Working at the city of Santa Fe has been a fantastic opportunity to apply that tinkering mindset, create meaningful impacts, and achieve our goals. After all, a tinkering mind is always looking for the next piece to connect. Beyond the office, Josie's family is her anchor. Staying connected with her children, siblings, and parents is her top priority. When it comes to unwinding, she likes to mix productivity with pleasure. For example, she might take a walk around her neighborhood to clear her mind, knowing that she'll return home inspired to whip up a Mexican dish like mole or enchiladas. Cooking and working out keeps all of her balance. So please join me in recognizing our controller, Josie Bolden. Josie, it is my honor to present you with this certificate of appreciation for all of your hard work here at the City of Santa Fe. We are just so grateful to have you here as part of our team. Thank you.
You don't need to say anything, and also we don't bite really. But that was a beautiful tribute to your work, and sounds like you've made your mark here in a very short period of time, and I can't tell you how grateful we are to your expertise and your hard work for working with Director Oster and getting us on track with the audits. So from the bottom of our hearts, thank you, a million thank yous. All right, have a great night. Good to see you. Okay, we are going to go from here to our first online presentation. So I believe, so the presentation is the City of Santa Fe Citywide Internal Controls Review. And I believe our Assistant City Manager, Layla, is on. Yes, there you are. Sorry, we're just adjusting the screens in the chamber. So yeah, I think it's good so that we can see you. I want to do a little framing of this, and then I would like Assistant City Manager Archuleta Maestas to do a little framing, and then we're going to let Chelsea Ritchie from Moss Adams dive in with the substance. I think it's important for all of us to remember that this is part of the work that Moss Adams is doing around the internal audits that the governing body approved. This is the first review, the first project, the first piece of that list of work that Moss Adams is taking on. And I just want to remind the committee and anybody listening that this work falls under the city manager's office. It is not something that falls under Director Oster's shop because many of these things are looking at processes, procedures, work that happens in the finance department. So there's a bit of separation so that we have objective and kind of a fair bird's eye look at this work. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to Assistant City Manager Archuleta Maestas to kind of continue to frame what we're going to hear from Chelsea Ritchie. So Layla, if you're ready, I'll let you have the mic.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. So tonight, we're going to hear from our partners at Moss Adams, as Chair Romero Worth said. They're going to present the overview of our internal controls review, and this is conducted as part of our audit plan, which is approved by the audit committee. The report is an important step in the city manager's ongoing efforts to enhance transparency and accountability for our constituents. So our internal control review looks at our checks and balances within the finance committee and makes sure that we are adhering to best practices and compliant with our rules and regulations that we have to follow as a city. This, as you mentioned, this provides a valuable roadmap for the city operations, and we really want to make sure that we are transparent with our constituents with these presentations that we provide to you. The review focuses again on internal controls within our finance department and underscores why the internal auditors, this is why the internal auditors operate under the city manager. You did mention this. We are trying to keep neutrality in the process and enables us to audit all of our departments across the city for the same reason. So this is just one of many reports that you'll be hearing from the internal auditors, again, to keep that transparency and to be able to make sure that we're doing best practices and compliance within our operations within the city. So I don't really want to take up too much time. You have a long agenda tonight, so I will pass it over to Chelsea Ritchie.
And Ms. Ritchie, the only other thing I would add about this is that the audit committee did hear this presentation first, and now it is coming to us. So just so we're all kind of on the same page about the path where this has been. So without further ado, welcome, and I'll let you take it over.
Thank you so much. And I was going to ask, Emily, would you mind if I shared my screen just so I could orient the committee to the report and not have you tell you where to go?
Absolutely. Are you able to share screen?
I am.
Great. Okay.
All right, wonderful. Are you all able to see my screen now?
We are. I will say it's a little small, but I think we have it in the packet as well. So it's fine.
Yes, and I can refer to page numbers as well. Thank you all for having me today. I am Chelsea Ritchie. I'm a director within our internal audit group at Moss Adams, and I had the pleasure of managing this job. Like, it has been said, this project really was a building block back in the fiscal year 23-24 audit plan. So to remind ourselves, this was one of the building blocks that we had when Moss Adams first got this contract that past December. So this project took place between December of 2023 and July of 2024. So that's an important thing to say, because it will be our building block and our roadmap for internal audits in the future. And it's a really nice, a nice companion to the enterprise risk assessment that we all presented to you a couple months ago. So the internal control review looked at 10 areas within, the financial realm of the city. And so if you look at page number 1, it talks about those 10 different areas that we were looking at specific internal controls around. And I want to compliment the city, because we did find some really well-designed internal controls that really should be celebrated that the city has. We have listed a couple, but this is not an exclusive list. Some things that were really great that the city did have is they had accounts receivable aging reports, and those were being reviewed. There was reviews and approvals for journal entries by the finance department. And also the completion of the year-end closing checklist as part of the financial close process. We were able to see that. And that, is a really important step to think about when we're thinking about the external audits. So, the city is really in a well-positioned area. Like other cities of your size and nature, there's also opportunities for improvement. And I don't want to harp on these and say these are findings. And it's really important, because with other internal audits that you will see me present to you all in the future, those will be really deep dives in certain areas. This is really just a review to look at internal controls. Are they working well? Or is there opportunity for improvement? And like Layla had mentioned, the internal control review, this should be really a roadmap for the city to utilize, both for management and internal audit, to utilize to see what areas of focus might be for future internal audits, as well, as looking at for some improvements that the city could do, easy improvements that the city could do. So that's kind of a synopsis of what the internal control review does. What you will see starting on page number 2 of this report is Moss Adams has given and worked with management to have some suggested priorities really for the next 12 to 18 months of, okay, here are some areas that either warrant some high, they are very important that you fix, or they're an easy fix that could really help smooth over the internal control system as a whole. And so you'll see that we listed those areas, cash management, financial reporting, close and reconciliations, fixed assets and asset management, as well as that purchasing and accounts payable. And you'll see the control objective relates directly to the overall review, which starts on page number 5. So, for example, accounts receivable A.1 talks about how the citywide policies and procedures for billing and collections, really we would expect those to be well documented and current, and what we did find and our recommendation, so on and so forth. So the internal control objective review, starting on page 5, it provides control issues that we identified, as well as what the expected control objective is. And we've provided and worked with management to provide a recommendation for them on how to alleviate or fix these problems, as well as what is the likelihood of occurrence. So how many times this is going to be happening, and the impact of occurrence. So based off of risk, and we talk about our risk ratings. I know that you guys, I'm hoping that you all have had a chance to review this, so I'm not going to bore you with the nitty-gritty details, but definitely looking at page number 4, you can see those different types of risks that we describe as low, moderate, or high, and then once again that likelihood. When we did this review, we looked at a multitude of things, mainly looking at policies and procedures. We also performed walkthroughs to make sure that we could really identify the design of those controls and understand the workflow processes of controls within the city. And we obtained an understanding of the characteristics of each of those relevant activities. So who is performing the objectives? How often are they operated? Are they manual? Are they electronic? What type of risk was this? This was, really a dive into the different types of internal controls that are performed within the city. We looked within the different types of controls. We were able to talk to finance as well as IT and public works, as they all play integral parts of the overall city's internal controls. With that, I will ask if you want me to go into the details or if there's questions that I can help answer about specific risks or objectives that we found.
I guess I defer to the committee, but I'd also wonder, is there a way to do it at a high level? Because my understanding is that some of these repeat, and just curious, like without going through each one, can you characterize?
Yeah, I can definitely characterize. So overall, policies and procedures was an area that we found, really needed to be updated as well as documented or become more comprehensive. And I can tell you right now that based off of what we found in the enterprise risk assessment, as well as the internal control review, Moss Adams and management within the city decided that this was a really high priority item that the city needed help with. And that is something that's been allocated for our internal audit plan for this current fiscal year that we're in. So that's a high level thing. I would say there was nothing that was absolutely earth shattering that we wouldn't see with other cities. A lot of it was reviews and approvals. And I can, when we were walking through with management on those reviews and approvals, a lot of this stuff might be something that's automatically put into the system. So it's not, something that we would see an initial, or there's not an audit. We couldn't see an audit trail, but talking with management, they've definitely already started putting in, working with IT to put in some of those audit trails and whatnot to make sure that they can see who's reviewed and approved. But because of the workflow of the accounting system, it was a review. There were being reviews and approvals. It's just that they weren't visible to an internal auditor.
Right,
So
and that would,
audience.
yeah, so that was my understanding, is that some of this work was being done. It's just there wasn't kind of the paper trail or the electronic trail or whatever kind of trail the popcorn trail, whatever trail it is you have in modern times, to sort of demonstrate that it happened. And I think you're identifying this as also sort of re-emphasized to other departments across the city that this is work that's very important to demonstrate. So correct me if I'm wrong in that understanding. And but essentially, some of this work was being done. It's just a question of making sure that we can show it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, and those were easy fixes that the city has already implemented and is working towards, so that, those reviews and approvals, those audit trails will be visible down the line.
Okay. Other things you want to point out? I guess I could also, does the committee have questions? Do you want to go through it? We do have a long agenda tonight. I know everyone can read this. I'm also happy to bring it back later if there are other questions. How do you all want to approach this?
Proceed.
Okay. Ms. Ritchie, anything else you want to add at this time?
I think that's it. I do just want to remind the committee that there were some great things that we saw. So, it's not all doom and gloom. I think that it really is an opportunity to show how far the finance committee in particular, finance team, excuse me, in particular has come, over the years and what improvements have been made thus far. Really nice job by the city.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for being here. Thank you for the work. I think it's obviously very important, and I'm glad we're doing it, and I'm glad we have a good partner. Director Oster, did you have anything you wanted to add at this time?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, absolutely. I would love to chime in. I just wanted to say that I feel like this document, the internal controls review, is very helpful for us in the finance department. As Ms. Ritchie mentioned, some of these items that are noted in the report are areas that we had already identified as opportunities for improvement. We had already started working on things there. And so really, it just gives us a good roadmap and some very helpful, constructive suggestions for how we can continue to improve as we move forward. So I'm excited about deploying, more of these suggestions. There are, like I said, a lot of things that we were already aware of, no surprises here, and some really good suggestions and tips, insights from Moss and their, experience with other clients about how we can tackle some of these common issues that a lot of cities face.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Cassett.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I think my only question at this point, I mean, yes, we can read this and that's easy to do, but understanding where we've already made progress. And then I'm curious, Director Oster, I would imagine at this point, you come up with a roadmap. What are the next steps for the finance department and for your team that does this work in order to correct these or, take advantage of those opportunities for improvement?
Thank you, Councilor Cassett. So there's a couple of things that were already even built into the internal audit plan that are coming out of this internal control evaluation. There's currently a deep dive, a full internal audit of procurement that's underway. The Moss Adams team is working with our payroll team on policies and procedures. Those are two that have already started. One of the themes that was already mentioned here is documentation of control activities. So for example, when someone runs a report and reviews it, making sure that we're noting the person that ran the report and what date they did that and what they reviewed and what the results were. That's something that we've already been discussing. So, we were running the report. We just are adding in now that documentation piece of who ran it, what did they see when they reviewed it, what date was that. That's especially important, for example, for something like a payroll report where we want to document that we're reviewing certain things before we issue the checks to employees. So those are things where, it's really just a matter of instituting sort of like a date and time stamp in the digital world, or wherever we can, we're trying to implement functionality in the Munis system so that we can use the Munis tool to document those review and approval steps through our workflow. So we're not having to retain, PDFs and things like that. So our first choice on documenting those approval steps is using Munis wherever we can. The next best is using some other form of digital documentation that we can attach in Munis. And then really only as a last resort would we want to go to paper documents that we have to retain in filing cabinets and things. But there are some things like that. For example, vehicle titles are, still hard copies. So we have to keep those in our filing cabinet. So those are some examples of activities that are already ongoing. And as I mentioned, the policies and procedures work and the internal audit of procurement had been identified already in the approved audit plan for Moss Adams. So those are already underway. There's another project planned relating to the financial close, both the monthly and the year-end close, to help us really document those procedures and also institute process improvements there, since we're always looking for opportunities to do better and be, more efficient in our work. Chelsea, is there anything else that you would want to highlight from your audit plan?
No, I think that's great. I was gonna say the, month end and year end close process, that's gonna be starting in February. So really good opportunity to do a deep dive and look at, process, opportunities as well as overall processes. And, my team will come in and do a deep dive into that to really help provide some meaningful recommendations in the end.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Really appreciate all of you being here.
All right, anybody else? All right, thank you very much for being with us tonight. Really appreciate the work, and we'll look forward to your next appearance with us. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, gotta find my agenda again. My iPad wants to do a software update, not helpful. I got it. Okay, here we go. Maybe. Okay, the next thing we have on the agenda is the Paseo Real Water Reclamation Facility Master Plan update. And we have a number of people here with us. We have John Rearing from Carollo Engineers, Jason Mumm, who's the principal with FCS Group. He does the modeling on our financing rate structure. And we have Director Dupuy. And I don't know how you want it, Director. I'm just going to kick it over to you, and you can kind of give us the roadmap.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Mr. Rearing, and do we also have Mr. Mumm available as well?
I think I saw him on the list there, so his camera's probably not on yet.
Okay, so it'll be a two-part presentation. The first from Mr. Rearing and then the second from Mr. Mumm. This was a presentation provided at last week's Public Works and Public Utility Committee meeting by Mr. Rearing. And then we added per request the additional funding related information to correspond with the expense related information presented by Mr. Rearing last week. And Mr. Rearing, if you'd like to start.
Okay, very good. Madam Chair, members of the committee, Mr. Dupuy, thanks for the opportunity to join you again this evening. I'll share my screen and go through some presentation materials. And then as Mr. Dupuy mentioned, Jason will then follow up with information about funding financing strategies. So this is the same presentation and discussion that we had a week ago at the Public Utilities and Public Works Committee. And I'll go through it with you and then be happy to answer questions as follow-ups from there. So the things that I want to cover with the group tonight is give an overview of the phased capital improvement plan, or CIP, for the Paseo Real Water Reclamation Facility. These are recommended projects over a 20-year period to get the facility in a place where it's reliably meeting its discharge permit and all the regulatory requirements. Secondly, we'll compare that to a concept level analysis of a new water reclamation facility that would, over time and eventually, replace the functionality of the Paseo Real facility. So kind of an either or type of thing. And then third, conclude with preliminary recommendations from the master plan, which is right now in draft format. I do want to start though with some key takeaways for your consideration. First off is a recommendation from the master planning effort that the existing facility be re-rated from its current capacity of permitted capacity of 13 million gallons per day down to 7 million gallons per day. And that's really in reflection of the reality that the conservation programs that the city has enacted and the community really has embraced have been so effective that past projections of flow are really far overstated. And so as a result, if the facility is rated for 13 million gallons per day or MGD of flow, but we're only treating the like 5 or 6 MGD today, then that requires us to build facilities and invest in those facilities that we know are oversized and that we know are going to sit idle. And so at the next permit renewal, which is scheduled for 2026, we recommend re-rating the plant to a more realistic 7 million gallons per day of flow. In reality, the projections show that the plant won't even hit that amount until very late part of this century, so 2090s kind of timing. So that's a pretty conservative recommendation. Secondly, I want to make it clear that there is a clear path as defined in the master plan for meeting current and anticipated discharge permit limits at the existing facility under future flow and load conditions. Certainly a new water reclamation facility is an alternative to that, but it certainly can be done at the existing facility, and it's not uncommon in the industry to do that. A third takeaway from this discussion, you'll see that the cost to construct a new water reclamation facility would be significantly higher, while we recognize, though, that there may be some non-monetizable benefits with the new facility that are hard to put dollars to, but nonetheless, dollar per dollar, it is going to be more expensive to do a new plant. Fourth one, there are some pieces, even if there was a new plant, but either way, there are some components of the treatment facility, specifically the solids management and the San Juan Chama return pipeline and pump station that should stay on site at Paseo Real, again, with or without a new plant. We'll go through some reasons for that. And lastly, one of the key recommendations at the end of the master plan is that the city should initiate some projects at Paseo Real, refer to them here as no regrets projects, while continuing to assess the merits of a new plant. These no regrets capital projects are urgent things that are really necessary and recommended for near-term compliance with a discharge permit. Even if there's going to be a new plant, it'll take some time to build that out to its full capacity. And during that time frame, we do think there are projects that should be done at the existing plant until more is known about the path forward. Okay, so starting in on Paseo Real water reclamation facility improvements under the baseline scenario. So this is one where we're not contemplating a new water reclamation facility under the assumption for the moment that this would be our facility in perpetuity. And again, we did a planning period of 20 years and recommend that the master planning be updated every 5 to 10 years, regardless of the facility that we're talking about. This is a site aerial that shows all the different process areas at the existing Paseo Real plant. The red boundary that you see there is airport property that is leased to the city for purposes of the wastewater treatment plant. And that becomes a consideration in the overall kind of long-term cost. There is some uncertainty in terms of what those lease payments will look like into the future. And so to the degree we can locate facilities outside of that red boundary, there are going to be some cost savings associated with that. And this is a super high-level summary of the phased capital improvement plan for the Paseo Real facility. You'll see the first segment there is projects in the near term, so 2025 through 2027, and then going on out through the rest of the 20-year planning period in the different colors there. You'll see there are a number of things shaded yellow here, indicating they're in the first 3 years. And that is because, again, some of those urgent things that we see a need for capital improvements at the plant for those near-term permit compliance and reliable permit compliance considerations. You'll also see that there are some that lie within that red boundary for the airport lease area, some that lie without, and that also factors into the long-term recommendations for the plant. We look at then just a high-level summary of the capital improvement plan. again, out now through 2045, so a 20-year planning period. And you can see in those same time periods what those projects total up to in terms of millions of dollars. These are shown in escalated dollars, so today's dollars, but escalated for inflation over time to the year that those costs would be incurred. And again, you can see that there's a larger dollar value there in the front end because there are some urgent things that need to be done at the plant. Those include improvements to the headworks facility. That's the front end of the plant. There's already been a 30% design done for that. Another key one here is the fifth bullet there, the ultraviolet light disinfection system improvements. That's also pretty critical for meeting the permit conditions for pathogens measured in E. coli at the outfall there, and also for the water reuse systems. That is a urgent need. That UV disinfection improvements system that has been it's under design now and nearing completion of the final design. There are other projects in there too. I'd be happy to speak to if there are questions on those, such as new granular media filters. That goes hand in hand with those disinfection improvements to help address some of the permit compliance issues that we've seen there over the past few years. Looking out further, then we start worrying about things like new permit conditions. We don't know with certainty the timing or what those permit conditions will exactly specify. We've been working with the New Mexico Environment Department and the EPA to try and identify those as best we can. So timing could shift a bit, but one of the improvements that would be necessary for what we anticipate as new, even lower nitrogen and phosphorus discharge limits would be to put in some denitrifying filters. There are other miscellaneous improvements needed over time. The third bucket here that's primarily related to PFAS, you may have heard of those in the news and the media as the so-called forever chemicals that really are pervasive in our environment. There's a lot of uncertainty in terms of how those are going to be regulated for wastewater treaters and dischargers, like the Paseo Real facility. That also would apply equally to a new facility if it were to be built. But right now, we're putting some placeholders in here, both in terms of dollar value and in terms of timing. Both of those are pretty uncertain because, again, there's a lot of work being done, as you can imagine, on the regulatory front for how those PFAS chemicals are going to be regulated. We already know pretty clearly how they're going to be regulated for drinking water. Really don't know how that's going to shake out yet for wastewater facilities like Paseo Real or potential replacement facility. So those costs would carry regardless of a new plant, one way or the other. And then the last one here is, as we look further out into the planning period, we would anticipate some of the equipment that we're replacing in the near term then would be near its end of useful life and would need renewal at that point. You add all that up in the columns here, show you the nominal fee, which are the numbers I just showed you, in 2024 dollars in the first row, and then escalated to the year of anticipated incurring those costs. So you can see that ranges $214 million in today's dollars, are escalated to 258. You'll see at the top here, referring to this as an AACE Class 5 estimate of the costs. AACE is an industry organization that sets standards for cost estimating of projects like this. Class 5 is at the lowest level of certainty, or the most uncertainty, and thus the widest range in these cost estimates, because there are many things that need to be fleshed out as the design progresses. So over time, as we develop design details, then we know more about the project and we can hone in on those exact costs more closely. At this point in time, this is what we would refer to as the 0% design development stage, meaning a whole lot of uncertainty, a whole lot of things could change and affect those costs. And so you see that's a pretty wide range there, ranging from anywhere from half the nominal to twice the nominal fee. And again, that range gets narrowed down as we develop further design details as we progress through that design process. Shifting gears now, thinking about the concept of a new water reclamation facility. Few assumptions to keep in mind here. One is that we've assumed that the new facility would be sited across the Santa Fe River from Paseo Real on some available land. That's good, certainly from a standpoint of getting the water to the facility. but more work to be done there to tone in on that and finalize that. I already mentioned that solids management, we're assuming and recommending that that would stay on site at Paseo Real. Also assuming that the San Juan Chama return and reuse pump station facility would remain on site at Paseo Real. And also that the new facility would be constructed over time. Here we're showing it in 2 million gallon per day increments. So starting with 2 MGD, then adding another 2, then adding another 2. That would get you out until the 2060s or so before it would need expanding again. That's an assumption that could be done in different increments. It could potentially be done all at once, but there are significant capital investment costs associated with this, as you'll see in a moment. And so for cash flow reasons, really for financial reasons, we're anticipating that it's likely that this would be built in phases, increments of capacity until such time as it can fully replace the Paseo Real facility, and that facility then could be fully decommissioned. During that interim time, you'd be operating 2 facilities, and there's some complications with that. But nonetheless, that also drives a need for some of those kind of urgent projects that I talked about at Paseo Real, whether there is or isn't a new plant, because that won't be able to fully replace its capacity right from day one. We've started some conceptual level kind of layouts and siting so you can get a feel for what this might look like. The diagram here shows the Paseo Real facility in the lower right in the aerial view there. You can see the Santa Fe River cutting across the middle, flowing from upper right to lower left. The blue shading is the floodplain there along the river. And then the siting of the facility, you can see starting with the red box at the top, the front end of the plant, and then flowing from top to bottom in this figure, primarily by gravity. And the more we can do that by gravity, the better, rather than pumping it throughout the facility. You can also see in this figure, like looking at the blue box here at the top, you can see it's got this kind of lighter shaded segment here, and then a larger box here. A lighter shade, both in the blue and the green, representing the bioreactors, and then some of the disinfection facilities and filtration facilities, that those indicate the lighter box is the initial 2 million gallon per day capacity, and then future build out, ultimately out to as much as 8 MGD in the future, depending on when that's needed. There are some things that will affect the costs as the design, where if this were to move forward as the design progresses, things that would affect the costs and things that can help control the costs a bit is the degree to which we can take advantage of the site topography, we can minimize and balance excavation on the site. Certainly, we need to stay out of the floodplain, and so that affects siting and also some of the piping that you see going across the river here. And flow transfer between those sites is going to be necessary, certainly in the interim, while the new facility is being built out to its ultimate capacity and able to replace the function of the liquids treatment at the Paseo Real site. But also long-term, if we do indeed keep the solids over here at Paseo Real, there will need to be some transfers back and forth across the river. So back to this aerial figure, I mentioned that the solids management facilities and the San Juan Chama return pump station, we're recommending that those stay on site, again, with or without a new facility. So you can see in the red shading here are some of the solids management facilities that are already there. There's 2 relatively new anaerobic digesters shown here. We are calling for a 3rd one for redundancy reasons so that you can maintain those. But since those were just recently built out on the site in recent years, doesn't make sense to demolish those and move those. Rather, we'd add to those. You also see the reuse pump station here. This is the existing 2 million gallon tank for reuse. The San Juan Chama return pump station will be sited here near the site of the existing outfall. Those would remain on site as well. Some of the facilities shown in orange over here are outside of the airport lease boundary, so that's good. Some of these would remain within the airport lease area. However, we may be able to shrink down the lease area and thus shrink down the payments that will go along with that over time. Okay, so same figures you saw before, but now adding to those black baseline numbers that I showed you before, I'm showing the numbers under the scenario where we would build a new water reclamation facility. And you can see those are lower, but these are just the costs at Paseo Real. So you recall we talked about some of the improvements in the near term that are urgent for compliance reasons. So updating now the list of projects, you can see that we could reduce the work in the headworks, but not eliminate it altogether. A couple of projects that we could just simply not do at Paseo Real, recognizing that during the interim, while the new plant's being built out, there would be risk of permit compliance issues because we would have essentially the same problems that we do today as long as Paseo Real is operational, even if it's partly operational. Some things then would continue on anyway, like the UV disinfection improvements. Those are urgent for permit compliance reasons. That third anaerobic digester, that would be a long-term investment for those reliability and maintenance reasons. Looking at the second package of projects in the 2028 to 2031 timeframe, likely that we could get away with not implementing the denitrifying filters and not investing in those at Paseo Real, but it's really a function of the timing of those permit conditions that would drive those relative to the timing of when the new plant could be built out and when we could decommission the Paseo Real plant. The third set of packages here, or projects here, again, this is for PFAS removal, really a fair amount of uncertainty in terms of timing and what will be required. Nonetheless, regardless of where the plant ultimately is sited, whether it's the Paseo Real plant or fully going in on the new plant, those costs are going to be necessary one way or the other. And so we carry those costs here. And then the last package, the headworks renewal, simply wouldn't be necessary because we envision the plant would be fully decommissioned by that time. So again, these are the costs only at Paseo Real. We also need to think about then the costs of adding in the new plant on top of that. So Paseo Real costs themselves could drop from 214 to 125 million. Again, that 125 includes some projects like the solids management and the PFAS removal that would carry forward over to the new site either way. And you see the ranges again in that class 5 range, anywhere from 50% to 200% of that nominal, while we've got a very low level of design detail developed. And so we did estimate the cost for a new water reclamation facility in a fair amount of detail here. We've seen really an unprecedented escalation in construction costs over the past few years, really post-COVID, in the water and wastewater industry, to the point where it's become very, very difficult to accurately project the costs of facilities, whether that's rehabilitating facilities or new facilities. The costs have become so dynamic, so market-driven and very site-specific that it becomes very, very difficult to accurately project these costs. And the costs will get more certain as design development continues or progresses. But at this point, there is quite a bit of uncertainty in the industry. Nobody really wins the cost estimating game these days. But nonetheless, we do have dedicated cost estimators that have put together an estimated cost for the new facility. New facility, looking just at the first 2 million gallon per day phase, again, in today's dollars or unescalated dollars, at a class 5 or 0% design development stage, estimating that at $248 million in today's dollars. So you take then what's the total cost moving forward would be $248 million for that first phase of capacity at the new water reclamation facility, plus some interim improvements at Paseo Real, plus then expanding the new water reclamation facility out over time to 6 MGD. Again, that'll get you out to the 2060s or so. And you add all that up and it adds up to about $600 million worth of investment, plus escalation to the year that'll be incurred to get to you to the point where you had that new facility fully online and ready to go and ready to decommission the Paseo Real plant. So with that, then what are some preliminary recommendations from the master plan? Again, the master plan is in draft formats under review by the city now, but it includes recommendations for the following. One is to initiate no regrets priority capital improvements at Paseo Real. It's really that front end of the bar chart that I showed you a moment ago for near-term permit compliance, regardless of whether there's going to be a new plant. These are things that should be done starting now at the existing plant whether there's going to be a new plant or not, because of the urgency of permit compliance and reliable permit compliance considerations. Then, on a parallel path with that, we'd recommend that the community continue its assessment of the potential benefits that would be associated with a new water reclamation facility. Also would recommend a thorough condition assessment of structural and electrical assets at the existing facility. That was not part of the master plan scope of work. It certainly is a cost that will add to those Paseo Real rehab costs that I just went through. And that then will give you the information that you really need to have a good conversation with the community and make an informed go or no-go decision on the new water reclamation facility. And so that's really kind of the upshot of the recommendations of the master plan. That concludes my presentation, and I think we'll turn it over now to Jason.
Hold on just a second. Director Dupuy, is that where you want to go? Is right over to Jason?
Madam Chair, that makes sense unless there's any
Okay.
questions related.
Does the committee have any burning questions on this kind of preliminary review of the master plan? I know the price tag is, when you first see it, is shocking. It's a lot of money.
Which time that I see it, will it not be
Yeah,
shocking?
yeah. Well, I think Jason's presentation may help. I mean, it's 600 million over 20 years, right?
Oh,
Madam Chair, the loan that we identified that has sufficiency to fund some significant portion, because we don't know the actual price yet, is available out to 30 years.
30 years. Okay. And this is no design. This was with no design. This is
Madam Chair, that's correct. It's a class 5.
right.
It's meant for budget planning, not actually allocating budget. Class 3 would be specific for purpose of allocating budget, normally is coupled with a preliminary engineering report, which is the next step, something that we've already engaged to provide for. The exact amount we would need for either option, having those class 3 estimates.
Yeah. Okay. I think maybe let's go to Jason Mumm's presentation. I asked for this because I think it'll help us with what you've just heard about kind of the big picture here.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Jason Mumm. I'm a principal with FCS Group. And some of you may know that I have been working with the city of Santa Fe for a good number of years on all issues related to the utilities, financial planning, and rate structures. Tonight, I'm going to see if I can do this in presentation mode. Is that showing up okay for you?
We can see the next slide, so I don't know if you.
The agenda, is that what you see?
Yeah, we do, but then we see, where you're going next. So
Oh, you got okay. Let me see here.
I don't think it's where you want to be, but we can
Here you go.
How's that?
work with it. There you go.
Good. Okay. We are going to go through a few things tonight to talk a little bit about these wastewater facilities and some plans that we've put in place currently to fund them, pay for them, and get at least down the road. One of the things that I think I should mention right away is some of the numbers that John was talking about. You saw that there were some wide ranges in there in terms of what the expected costs might be. We're going to have some numbers in here tonight for those costs that are in that range, but I don't know that all of them are going to match up exactly. I'll try to point those out as we go. We are going to review the capital projects first. We'll just take a look at what we're using in terms of our assumptions for right now. We'll go over what the expected fund balance would be if we don't do anything, if we don't change the rates, if we don't go out and get financing. That's meant to kind of show us just how much we have to do to make this all work. We'll go over what the sources of capital funding and financing are, at least based on our assumptions today. We'll go over the proposed revenue increases that we're going to need to make those sources of funding work. And then we'll kind of take a look at what that all means in terms of where does that put us in terms of our expected fund balances over the next 10 years, where we will be in terms of our debt service and our debt service coverage over that time. And then a little bit about the residential bill impacts. And then we'll conclude on a short comparison to some of the surrounding communities. Okay. Oh, hang on a second. Didn't want to. Okay. All right, let's talk about the capital projects first. Excuse me. The wastewater is planning to spend, and I say wastewater, that's the wastewater division, is planning to spend approximately $260 million over the next 10 years. When we did this, and we do these updates at least once a year and more often if needed. For example, when we have a big project like this on our plate, we look at these financial plans more frequently than once per year. But last year when we did this update, we only had $8.6 million identified over the 10-year time frame that we're talking about for capital improvements. So all of this has been kind of a more or less very recent set of updates. Let's talk about some of these major categories. These are capital project spending in millions of dollars. The blue area that you see on here, these would be the wastewater treatment facility costs. One of the things about the financing plan is that the dollars are kind of agnostic to the decision making. So whether you decide to go and keep the existing facility and do the improvements that John talked about with the existing facility in the range of $214 million in 2024 dollars, or if you go the route of a brand new facility and you go down that road, the dollars are agnostic to which one of those you choose. Now, obviously, if you go down the road of the new facility, we've got some more unknowns, and those haven't all been accounted for here in this particular plan. But the new facility that we have in there, those costs in the blue total up to $210 million in 2024 dollars. So that's more or less consistent with at least getting through phase one, the first 2 MGD of a facility, and also consistent with repairing the old facility if that's the direction you want to go. We do have some additional dollars in there for some of the things that John identified as no regrets projects. Only $10 million, however, is what we have in the assumptions for now. And then there are other projects as well, things that wastewater is normally doing, like replacing sewer lines every year. That falls into that category. There's one other item on here I want to draw to your attention, and that's in fiscal year 2028. Part of the plan that we have in place speaks to retiring the current Series 2019 bonds. We'll talk a little bit more about it as we move on in the presentation, but it will require about $10.3 million to call those bonds and retire them. And after going over this with your municipal advisor at Hilltop Securities, we believe that this would be a good move to reduce the cash flow requirements for the wastewater utility, reduce pressure on rates, and increase cash flow available for these capital projects. So that's just a broad overview of the major projects that we have on the plate here. And it's important to note that wastewater can't afford to fund those projects without additional financing or rate increases right now. So what this is showing, this is not a course of action that we're showing. This is meant to show just sort of what the magnitude is of the investments. So, we currently have about $30 million in cash, and we generate a few $1 million a year in additional money that can be used for capital projects. But the rate of investment that's going on with the plant and everything else is faster than that. So if we didn't do anything at all, cash would become negative very quickly. By fiscal year 2027. It would bottom out at approximately negative $200 million by 2033. So we have some work to do. And in order to make this all work and fund it and finance it, wastewater is going to finance those capital improvements with a combination right now of NMED loans and cash. I should say that wastewater and utilities in general is always on the lookout for grants and other opportunities to fund capital projects, and they will continue to do so. For now, what we have in the financial plan are things that we know and that are in our control. We already have commitments from NMED for $114 million, and they have indicated a willingness to lend even more than that. And so for our plan today, our assumptions today, we have $189 million in NMED loans, which would include the authorized 114, and it assumes the additional amount as being a part of that willingness that I talked about from the state. So that's an assumption that we're making. It's provisional, but we believe it's a strong one. The other major component of the funding would be cash. We need about $62.4 million in cash to round this out. Right now, there's $30 million in reserves. We have to retain a portion of that. I'll talk more about the cash reserves in a moment for some minimum reserve requirements. So we would need to add net $32.4 million in cash in order to make this funding and financing plan work. Those increases, the $32.4 million would need to be generated by increased rates unless other sources became available, such as grants, for example. So if we end up having a grant opportunity that makes its way into our thinking, then we come back, we update the plan, we come back to you and tell you the good news. There are a couple of other things that can be used for funding. We have utility expansion charges, that's the UECs. Currently, we expect over the next 10 years that would bring in about $7.1 million. And then interest earnings from all of these deposits that are being put into your bank account, we estimate that would be approximately another $7.6 million over the 10-year period. And that would round out the necessary funding for the projects. Now, to support the financing and the capital projects themselves, we're going to need to do some increases to revenue. So, two things. Again, we have to support new debt service for the NMED loans, and we have to generate an additional $32 million in cash to round out the funding for the facilities. Right now, revenue includes what you earn from rates, and that's pretty straightforward. Revenues also include the environmental GRT that goes to wastewater from the city. And it also includes some miscellaneous revenue from things like fees and other charges that don't have to do with rates. In total, right now, about 75% of all the revenue that wastewater earns comes from rates. With the proposal that you're seeing in front of you, that ratio would increase to about 80%. And I should note, too, that the revenue stream includes an assumption of effluent sales to the MRC and the Santa Fe Country Club, et cetera. I believe you're familiar with those. Debt service on the NMED loan, which you'll see we have debt service in here twice. Over at the left-hand side, starting in FY 2024 through FY 27, you see a small sliver of bright orange in the stack there, and that's the existing debt service on the 2019 series bonds that I mentioned earlier. Now, the plan is to retire those by calling them in fiscal year 2028. So when you look at 2028 in the chart, you won't see any orange sliver there. That's because for a couple of years, there is no debt service that we're expecting. The 2019s will be retired, and the NMED loan repayments will not have started yet. So once the NMED loans start, we expect roughly that's going to be in fiscal year 2030. that payment will then be $6.3 million per year for 30 years, and that's at a 0.01% interest rate. And that's the larger bright orange sliver that you see in those years going out to 2033. And of course, it would continue for many more years after that, unless the loans were repaid for some reason early. Cash for projects. The rates need to generate, as I mentioned, about 32.4 million additional cash. And you can kind of see by looking at the chart here, the difference between the two lines on the chart really indicates the gap that needs to be covered by some rate increases primarily. Now, if we go ahead and do those increases, we can also forecast our cash position. It's not negative like we saw before. The wastewater cash reserves will remain positive, and they would position Santa Fe for sustainable finances going forward, even past 2033. So the balances, you see them jumping up there in those few years, 26 through 28. That's what we expect would happen as we take loan proceeds from NMED and we then apply it to projects. So this is sort of a normal thing that we see with projects like this. We're going to increase our cash and then we're going to spend it. So it's going to go up in 2026, and then we're going to see it get spent down until it gets down to a more sustainable level. The minimum balances, which is something that we need to keep in mind with our cash, these aren't going to change, but they include 120 days of operating costs as part of the minimum. We also have a $3 million emergency reserve. That's part of our required minimum, and an additional $2 million interrate stabilization. So all told, that average is around $10 million per year that we need to keep as a minimum reserve. This one has a lot going on in it, but the NMED debt service is deferred to FY 2030, and we think the annual payment is manageable with the proposed increases that we have. What we're seeing in the chart here is the annual debt service in blue. So these are the principal and interest payments that wastewater will need to make over time. And in the orange bars, we see the net revenue. Net revenue is our revenue from all allowable sources, which is pretty much everything, including GRT. And we subtract from that the operating and maintenance expenses. That gives us net revenue. That's the amount of money that's available to service the debt. And you can see that it's going to jump up quite a bit as we increase rates, but we don't increase the debt service. So we're kind of getting ahead of that future debt service there. That debt service coverage ratio, which is what I get when I divide the net revenue by the annual debt service, jumps from 3.0 to 9.2. In 28 and 29, it would fall to essentially, it really isn't 1.0, it's really 0, because there is no debt service in either of those years. And then as we go into 2030 and beyond, we get that ratio back into this 1.5x category. 1.5 times has long been a financial policy for Santa Fe Utilities. We try to maintain 1.5 times coverage on all debts. And we've been very successful in doing that. And that's a major reason why Fitch and Moody's have recently reaffirmed wastewater with AA ratings. So we believe you'll be left in good shape here. That one of the key reasons for the proposed rate increases that we have here is to make sure that we can maintain this 1.5 minimum coverage. And when we start the debt service in FY 2030, you can see that we kind of land it right there at 1.5, and it fluctuates a little bit thereafter. But that's really the constraint that we're trying to hit. It is a rate increase. We think the typical residential customer would pay an additional $3.86, and it would hopefully start as soon as we can get the rate ordinance approved. Our model right now assumes that would be in January. We can adjust that as needed, but we need to generate another $3.86 on a typical bill. Typical resident in Santa Fe gets billed for 3,000 gallons per month of wastewater flows. And the current rate structure currently includes a $7.53 per month base charge, which is a monthly charge that doesn't change based on usage, and a $4.64 per 1,000 gallon volumetric charge. So when you add all those things up, you get a typical bill now that's just over $20. And in the future, you can see in the green areas here, this is the sort of cumulative amount of increase that typical residents would expect, starting at 386 in fiscal year 2025, which really means January of 2025, and would go up thereafter by about 4% per year starting in 2026. Monthly bills in nearby communities are already higher than those that are being proposed in Santa Fe. What we have on the left-hand side of our chart here shows Santa Fe's current bill, and then with the proposed increases, at least through FY 2028 here towards the middle of the chart. And then we've got Rio Rancho, Las Vegas, and Santa Fe County as the next three comparisons. Las Cruces and Albuquerque are less than Santa Fe at the moment. But we wanted to give you a sense of where you fit in some of the regional communities around you that are of roughly equivalent size. So that's all I had for this evening. I'd be happy to take some questions. Whatever you've got, I'll try to answer.
Okay, I want to just a couple, Director Dupuy, did you want to add anything? And then there are a couple things I want to underscore, and then we can go to questions.
I have quite a few items, but I don't know if in the interest of time, maybe just short and sweet, just highlight a few items.
I think that'd be great.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to point out one thing. These are just some details, but I think there are some important details. We have, with the loan that we have worked into our model, what I would believe is like a once-in-a-career lending opportunity. We have the opportunity to have a loan at 0.01% interest. Just to put it into context, if we would use the typical EPA funding mechanism for the Biden infrastructure law, that would follow a bond index, and it's a set market rate, and an alternative would be a municipal bond against our rate revenues. Those would be at about the 4% range. Whenever you compare what we have the opportunity for and those at the 4% range, it equates to a 73% match grant. So if we take a loan for 100 million, it's like we get a grant for 73 million. So just putting that into context, I mean, it is the best opportunity that I know of across the country. Even areas where there are grants being obtained, no one's obtaining grants in that dollar amount. And then the other is that there are numerous factors that move the numerator or denominator in the equation Mr. Mom mentioned, which is our coverage ratio, our debt service coverage ratio, which is really what determines if we could maintain our bond rating with what lending we take on. So we can either increase our revenues or we can decrease our expenses. One of the expenses that we intend to decrease that we've mentioned before is our lease with the airport. That's one that it is high on my priority list to bring a resolution to you so that we can reduce that through a land swap purchase. And we've specifically identified the land across the river, which is the location for a potential new facility. Whether we would have that new facility or not, that land swap is a very meaningful outcome, given that over any period of time that you're leasing, there's a recovery of just purchasing versus leasing long term. The benefit doing it now is that it enables our expenses to go down. So that significantly affects how much we can take out in loans. And so at the current rate, like the numbers I always use, I don't know why, but it's $800,000 in expenses is an additional 30 million in loans that we would be eligible for. So just putting that all into context for you, I thought those are two nuanced but meaningful things to mention.
Yeah, and one of those things was something I wanted to emphasize, which is the interest rate on the NMED loans. And they are modeled out for us, but there is also an opportunity that those might be converted at some point to grants. So, I mean, we have to model them as though they're loans, because that's not a sure thing, but there is this possibility that maybe at some point they become grants, and that would be obviously good news for this project, and I think something to keep in mind as we're looking at our choices. And then I also just want to emphasize that we have pretty large reserves. That 30 million in reserves is way more than we're really required. So that we're going into this in a good place because we have such high reserves. We need to, you know, and I think we had the slide that talks about the 120 days of operating costs and the fact that, you know, we want to have a little padding on that. But I think it's important that people realize how big our reserves are, and that puts us in a good starting point as we start to look at this project and the financing for it. So I wanted to point out those two things, and I don't know if you want to add to any of that, Director.
No, Madam Chair, except that we have talked at length with NMED about the potential for their loan forgiveness or conversion. And they've told us specifically that that's a separate thing. You have to apply for it subsequently, but we've made it very known that we intend to. They seem very supportive. They can't make any guarantees, and it's all dependent upon funding annually and the need for that annual allocation that's available. But I think we show that we are meaningfully considering what our rates are so that we're being responsible, and also that we are trying to provide for the best alternatives with as much well-informed understanding on what the options are before making a decision. So whichever decision we go with, it's one that's well thought out.
Okay, and just a couple things. Mr. Rearing, can you give us some context? We have context on our rates. Can you give us some context on the costs of updating wastewater reclamation facilities? They are expensive beasts, generally speaking.
Sure, Madam Chair. So in developing the preliminary cost estimates that I shared with you here today for the new facility, we did benchmark that against our recent bid costs around the country that are escalating very rapidly, and other kind of pure facilities that we're seeing, like the town of Telluride in Colorado, the Dominion Water and Sanitation District in the south part of the Denver metro area, seeing similar costs and estimates in a similar range when you think about that in terms of the capacity, dollars per gallon per day of capacity.
Okay, I think it's important for everybody to understand that as well. All right, I think I had one other thing, Director, but I can't think of what it is off the top of my head. Questions from the committee? Councilor Cassett.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you, everybody, for being here. I apologize if I asked some questions that you've already gone over. There was a lot here. Kind of a big picture when we're thinking about this, especially the length of time of this investment. You know, if we're looking at setting the city up for success, for longevity, in, you know, 30 to 50 years, what does that look like, the difference between, you know, building a new facility as opposed to rehabbing? what we currently have. Because I think that's an important consideration. I mean, it's, we don't want to make a decision that's necessarily going to leave the community in a place in 30 years where they're going to have to potentially do more, spend more. But, where do we really get the most bang for our buck in terms of an investment that'll last?
Madam Chair, Councilor Cassett. It's a difficult question to answer, and Mr. Rearing alluded to it earlier, where the existing facility can be provisioned to meet current requirements. And ultimately, we need to start treating the facility like it's the new facility, because otherwise we shouldn't get the keys to a new facility, because we'll do the same, but it's very dependent upon what the new facility will be. If you have that comparison, and the existing facility can be modified extensively to be near equivalent of a new facility, but we've, in our prior presentation, explained how from up to 60 years ago, the plant has been built out over time. And like we analogize it to a Frankenstein, and it creates a lot of complexity. And ultimately, having the ability for a new facility on greenfield, like area that doesn't have much development on it yet, that is also provisioned for what we often call future proofing, where you may not put in all the facilities that are needed in the anticipated future, but you leave space for them and you design so that they're easily integrated when they're needed. So let's say we wanted to anticipate treating to a higher level for PFAS, we'd leave an area for a PFAS treatment component. If we wanted to have anticipation for direct potable reuse, we'd leave an area for the processes necessary to achieve that standard as we know it today. And so that's what I would anticipate bringing to you, because to me, that's the real value in a new facility, is the reduction in complication and taking advantage of the newest technology in a small footprint, but then having a way to transition meaningfully over time without it being unaffordable. And so that's why we presented an option, which I think is really the only way we can get there if we wanted it to go the new facility route. So I tried to propose an option that is doable, and that would be building out in a modular fashion and maintaining the existing facility. So you do spend some money maintaining that existing facility in the interim. But like I said, we need to start running the existing facility like it is the new facility. And so that gives us that ability, including connecting it with the latest and greatest in terms of operation at a distance. So running it from a panel rather than running it by doing rounds, walking around.
So potentially better operation costs in the future, very far future. And when we're looking at a time when we're potentially running two facilities, what does that look like for operations as well? I mean, that's another consideration. This is just the capital. We did discuss the net, but what does that start to look like for what we would have to do in terms of staffing? Would we be able to staff to, given we already have challenges finding individuals that are able to currently, fulfill all the needs? And we know that that's a field that needs it needs support in order to really get the education and knowledge and individuals there. So what does that start to look like? I mean, and again, I know these are really out in the future, and so I understand there's a lot you cannot predict. So, but just your thoughts there.
Madam Chair, Councilor Cassett, there is one thing that we can, with high level of confidence, understand is forthcoming, and that's a reduction in the workforce availability. And so if we don't provision for a reduction in the workforce in some capacity, at least in an interim phase, because it takes an extended period of time to grow operators, and otherwise we're just fighting with our neighbors or the limited few. So that's why the investment in a training pipeline not only for us, but for the community around us. And then partnering with them so that every resource we can is leveraged to build the workforce. And even with that, we expect a declining workforce. So provisioning the existing facility with controls is a meaningful investment that ultimately is balanced with the reduction in expenses from additional staff that we wouldn't be able to find anyway, and prevents us from wearing out our staff, having too much burden. And we have to do the training so that they understand how to utilize those tools effectively. So it's all part of a well-knitted puzzle that ultimately, if we work now, I think we're able to be on track for something meaningful into the future where we avoid the major impacts of the operator shortage and take advantage of the reduction in expenses by implementing the right technology to still maintain the facility how it needs to be maintained.
Okay, thank you for that. It's helpful and also a little scary. Sorry, something just left my brain. Real fast. I know that we talked about it's kind of some immediate costs. There's immediate things that we really just have to do, and then also the next few assessments. I would imagine we want to get on those pretty quickly. Do we already have funding to move forward with the next round of assessments to answer some of these questions that are still lingering?
Madam Chair, we're already working on the development of the Class 3 cost estimate, if that's what you're referring to, or Madam Chair, Council Cassett. And the additional services for community engagement is something that we intend to add to the scope of Carollo's contract. And we've already started developing that scope and options related to our past experience with our water division and community engagement. We got really good feedback the last time we went out in 2019 doing surveys and extensive community meetings. We intend to replicate something similar to that. And then following back up with a presentation to committees and council for direction and decision to move go, no go, or option 1, option 2 kind of thing.
Okay.
That's what you're referring to.
Yeah, Councilor Cassidy, if I can, that is the point that I wanted Director Dupuy to make is so what you're seeing here is a draft of the master plan and some assumptions about kind of preliminary thoughts about how we would approach funding the first phase, which is the 2 MGD. And Director Dupuy, if you could talk a little bit more about, before we decide or pick a lane or a path, there's going to be this community engagement, and we're going to know more before we decide new facility, not new facility. And can you just speak to that a little bit? And I'm sorry, Councilor Cassidy, but I think it's good. It's good foundation. We heard a little bit at Public Works, Public Utilities about this. I think it'd be good for this committee to hear it as well. It's an important part of the conversation is to where we are right now. This is not it. This is a preliminary.
Correct, Madam Chair. So one of the takeaways I took from the 2019 survey was that it was a very unique community that we live in. We care a lot about the environment. We care a lot about the meaningful things around us so that we appreciate the community we live in. And there was a question about whether or not direct potable reuse was supported. And we literally got, instead of just yes or no, we got handwritten responses saying, why haven't you done it yet? And every training in this industry around the country helps you to have talking points on how to explain it so that there isn't fear about direct potable reuse. And so to have a community where you don't have to do that, they're already asking for you to have done it, made me realize it's super important to engage with the community to understand and not make assumptions about what the options are. And that's something that we will accomplish, come back to you with that feedback from the community, including the more in-depth information to develop a Class 3 cost estimate with numbers that we can feel more confident are likely to be what we would receive if we went out for bids.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's very helpful. And thank you for that reminder that this is very preliminary, and we'll get to narrow this down a little bit more. Can you explain just the land swap real fast? Who owns what? What is getting swapped? I know you mentioned it's the site that is the potential for if a new wastewater treatment plant were to be built. You would swap that with the airport, so the airport would then have that? Just explain, please.
Madam Chair, Councilor Cassett, I'd ask Mr. Rearing if it's possible for you to share the slide again with the layout of the existing facility with the boundaries shown for the airport boundary. So the city owns the land that the wastewater treatment plant is located on. And ultimately, sometime extended time ago, the airport boundary was developed and reported to the FAA. It's official. You can go on the FAA's website. I've done it myself. Pull up the shape file, load it in the GIS, and it'll show you that northern boundary, so that the area to the south of it, out to the highway, is in the airport boundary with the FAA. So the FAA recently said anyone in your boundary needs to have a lease. We brought that to the governing body, I believe, between June and August of 23. And the options for not having a long-term commitment when the alternative might be like relocating the entire facility is at some point the lines cross with leasing versus purchasing. So anything that's a really long-term investment, you really have to evaluate the reality of or financial mindfulness of leasing. So that discussion led us to understand that it is possible to modify the FAA recorded airport boundary, but they have some caveats and checkboxes and a process. And they gave us some information related to that. If it's with a project that the airport is already doing, which we have numerous projects moving forward, and there is a meaningful amount of land that is similarly able to be leased. And so at the time, the airport was negotiating with Netflix on a possible build out for film studio area. And the area across the river is 210 acres for $1.6 million. We currently are paying $600,000 a year. So you can do the math. It doesn't take long to return on your investment. And, you know, we could even facilitate helping whatever is needed for the land to be leased in the future. But we have to go through that process with the FAA. And obviously the agreements with the property owner would need to be conditioned such that we don't end up with a piece of property we can't do anything with. So the first step, according to our legal department, is to come to you and seek a resolution. You'll have a sponsor and get that direction from the council for us to be able to go to the next step with the property owner.
Okay, thank you for that. That's helpful. I don't think I have any other questions at the moment. I'll let you know when I do after I process this a bit. So I will yield the floor. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And this is a lot. And so but it's, again, it's a starting place, and we're going to be coming back to this with more information and finer plans and cost estimates and things. But I did think it was important that this committee have the benefit of these presentations. Other questions from the committee? Yes, Councilor Garcia.
Just a quick comment, and I was waiting for my colleagues that hadn't seen this presentation before to ask their questions. You know, I think I made a comment to the last Public Works Utility Committee meeting in regards to longevity and reliability into the future and, you know, the price tag obviously for a new car versus a used car that's refurbished and will last, you know, just as long, was my analogy, but, you know, there's a lot, excuse me, there's a lot of intricacies to this, and obviously it's just not, as simple as, building a new plant, shutting the old one down and moving forward. It almost does seem like we do have, we'll continue to use the old plant, for some purposes into the future anyway, so it's almost kind of like still a patchwork or a Frankenstein, so to speak, as it's been, it's been stated. But, excuse me, I did have a question in regards to the rate increase. I think it was mentioned that it would be a rate increase of, 30, would need to be to cover $32.4 million. And, with that, residentials would increase $3 to $4, which is kind of what I heard. I could be incorrect, but, was there other, what other areas of our rates would be increased to either commercial customers or possibly new developments? I think some of the biggest thing that I hear through the community is another apartment complex, you know, another huge development, and all this is adding to our our existing stress on our current facility and will in the future, you know, until we stop building. You know, I think that having a good plan that makes it fair for everyone, obviously, I believe everyone should have to contribute to it, but, you know, I think those are some of the things, and you know, I agree with Councilor Romero Worth, is that we're just vetting the initial stages as to what do we do. Obviously we cannot do nothing. We will continue in the same situation that we've been for the you know, past few years and not be in compliance. And so I think that, and again, just a comment, would like to know a little bit more in the future of how those rate increases would be, because I think you have to do increases. Yeah, no, this is a lot of work. So I do commend you for how much work you have put into this, because it's something that's been hot on the minds of many people, especially downstream from the plant, in regards to their water that they're using, and contaminants and so on and so forth. So, like I said, just comments, not too many more questions, because I know we have a lot more on our agenda. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right. I want to thank Mr. Rearing, Mr. Mum, Director Dupuy for being here tonight. Really appreciate it. I know we're going to be seeing more of you, but I do appreciate this starting point for looking at this project and the different aspects of it that we're going to need to really become familiar with. So appreciate your time. Thank you for being here.
Madam Chair, councilors, thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, we're going to go to our consent agenda, and I'm just going to kick us right off. We have item A pulled, request for approval of amendment number 5 to amended and restated lease agreement item 19-0872 with Santa Fe Recovery Center, Inc. for buildings at 1600 South St. Michael's Drive to extend the term of the lease for King Hall to September 1st, 2025, and the term of the lease for the student apartments to February 1st, 2025. Councilor Cassett, I believe you pulled this item. We have Daniel Hernandez, our Director of Metropolitan Redevelopment Agency, with us, as well as other guests, Mr. Hernandez, you can introduce them, and Councilor Cassett, I'll let you take it and direct your questions wherever you want.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. I will be fast. I did tell you guys to go home. So this is your decision that you're still here, just so you know. It's 6:45, it's past dinner. I'm not taking responsibility for this one. I just know, you know, we know that this has been coming as we've discussed what's happening at Midtown. We have a number of organizations, Santa Fe Recovery being one of them, that are really critical to a lot of other big issues in our community. And so my question is, you know, as we are moving some of these organizations off, and specifically you all are here, how this is going to impact services? Do you have a plan? And then Daniel, what is the city doing as we, you know, start to move through these as a general process? Because it's time now. We're developing.
Sure, I'll turn it over to them very quickly. They came to us asking for an extension in time, and they'll explain the program and why we were willing to do that for just the 2-month period. And I cleared it with the Public Works Department, Facilities Department as well. So they were comfortable with that 2-month extension. But I'll let them really explain. And then the other Consuelo's Place as well, we're in discussions with them. They've talked a little bit about their relocation transition plans, but they haven't given us anything confirming or clear yet. So we'll continue speaking with them over the course of time.
Madam Chair, Councilor Cazalet, my name is Eric Sanchez. I'm the Director of General Services at Santa Fe Recovery Center.
It's Barry Orr, the Prevention and Recovery Officer with Santa Fe Recovery.
I'm going to ask both of you to speak directly into the mic. You can't share it. I'm so sorry. It just, we can hear you, but anybody who's watching on demand later or currently streaming can't hear you unless you're right at the mic. So thanks.
Got it. So to answer your question, in short, we've been in the process of renovating a building off of Warner Avenue to house our men's residential program. And we're right in the middle of that project. And so that's the reason for the extension. We're scheduled to be completed with that in the middle of the summer or beginning of July. And that will move all the clients and all of our services from King Hall to that building immediately afterwards. So we were granted the extension until September 1st. In the King Hall portion of the Midtown campus, we will be out of the apartments, which housed our extended program at February 1st of this year. And we're just going to move them into another wing at King Hall until our until the building's ready.
And is this going to impact your capacity? I mean, maybe in a positive way, but are you still going to be able to serve the same number of individuals? I know that that's been a really big challenge in this community, as you all know, that we just do not have enough service providers. So how is that going to impact what you can do for the city?
Well, it's going to impact our capacity a little bit as we're moving our extended program into one of the pods, and so we'll be able to have 48 beds in our new facility at Warner Avenue. So there'll be 36 30-day residential beds and 12 extended program beds. It's a reduction a little bit in our capacity for our extended program, but we're actually expanding our services, our outpatient services, and all like the aftercare services that we're doing to kind of compensate for that. And actually, Barry can talk a lot more of that.
Madam Chair, Councilor Cassett, again, I'll introduce myself, Barry Orr, Chief Prevention and Recovery Officer with Santa Fe Recovery Center. Into the mic this time. First and foremost, we appreciate the city's flexibility with us. As we know, it takes a lot of planning to move facilities and be able to maintain these critical services without interruption. I'm really happy to say that thanks to the work of Eric and many on our staff, as well as working very closely with the city and the flexibility that the city's extended, we do have a plan to be able to continue services without disruption. As Eric said, we do lose several extended residential beds, so we lose some capacity there. However, I'm confident that through expansion of outpatient services, as Eric mentioned, we'll be able to compensate for that. We are in the midst of launching the CCBHC model, which is a certified community behavioral health clinic. In this, the Recovery Center for a long time has been the largest residential treatment center in the state, and obviously we'll want to continue to do those vital services because that's the first step for many. This outpatient services model that we're working on launching will be able to supplement some of those services in a different way. So Right now, what you see is more of a single site model. Well, it's not really single site because we have multiple campuses, but if we're looking at gender specific programming for men, what we see right now at King Hall is what I would call a single site model with a large residential campus. We'll still have that at our new location at Warner Avenue. And one of the ways that we can supplement services is by doing scattered site, where people can still access housing, what you would call recovery housing, while accessing intensive outpatient services. We're adding a lot of case management and navigation around the social determinants of health, as well as additional services now for instance, for children and families, crisis services, and more peer support services. So a whole array that's under that CCBHC model, where we'll be able to meet people more effectively where they're at, which is great because we'll be able to do more services on the front end for people who might not have otherwise needed residential services, and maybe prevent them from needing withdrawal management or the residential settings, as well as when people step down from residential services, which will be at Warner, currently at King Hall. They'll have more of that opportunity to engage in those outpatient services, which could include an expansion of this scattered site housing model. So we do have a plan. It's a lot of transition, a lot of service expansion. And again, we're just really thankful for the city's flexibility, and also the project that Eric is leading to move us into Warner. So rest assured, hopefully, we'll be able to provide services with enough continuity so that the city will not feel the impact of a huge service loss during that transition.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And really thank you for being so proactive in that. Really do appreciate it. You are the first of our services that, so this is a nice model to follow. Thank you for making the first one less painful. Those were all my questions. Thank you guys for staying, and thank you, Mr. Hernandez. And with that, I'll move for approval.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion on this? Seeing none, can we get a roll call, please?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell, Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Romero Worth.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. All right, we are now going to item, let's see, all right, H. A, B, C, D, F, G. Request for approval of general services contract with University of New Mexico Anderson School Center for Responsible Entrepreneurship for entrepreneurial support, training, and administrating an accelerator program in the total amount of $297,515.63, including NMGRT, for a 3-year term. And I believe we have Johanna Nelson of the Office of Economic Development. Welcome, Director. And Councilor Lindell, you pulled this item.
Good evening.
Thank you.
We have 2 people online too, just noting.
Okay.
Okay, terrific.
Thank you. Why don't you just give me a very, very quick overview of what this program does?
Sure, Madam Chair.
What we're purchasing.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about this really exciting contract. This is supporting the University of New Mexico's Center for Responsible Entrepreneurship and the associated programming with that initiative. And so that includes an accelerator as well as a number of technical assistance efforts to support entrepreneurs that are focused on what you would call a social benefit or a triple bottom line. And this effort has been in place in our community for the last couple of years. And by establishing our formal support, it allows UNM to have more of a presence here and to increase their reach and efforts here. And I am joined by 2 folks, Eric Renz-Whitmore, who is on our staff at OED, and Rob Del Campo, who is representing CRE in UNM.
Okay. I didn't really see in here any breakdown of how our costs go, other than just some kind of very, very general deliverables. One of my concerns with this was, I'm looking for the page, for FY 2024, we had a payment, June 30th of 2024 of $50,000. Is that outside of this contract, or is this a retroactive payment? What is this?
Madam Chair, members of the council, I'm glad that you asked that question. This has gone through the procurement process. So when we established this contract, it was in fiscal year 24. So I would ask Director Oster and our attorney if we are able to amend that. We haven't made any payment on this currently, so we would need to adjust the dates to reflect the beginning of the and the subsequent payments. I want to clarify too, this is for 3 years ending June 30th of 2026. And ideally, we are splitting the payments up to extend within those fiscal years.
So did we enter into working with this group with a contract that wasn't current?
Madam Chair, members of the council, no. They've been in operation in our community, independent of our support.
Okay, so why are we paying them for 2024 if they were operating independent of our support?
Madam Chair, members of the council, we would need to amend that date to not include 2024 because we were not able to execute the contract within that fiscal year.
Okay.
So we'd need to adjust the dates.
Director Oster, do you want to speak to that?
Certainly, Madam Chair and members of the Finance Committee. So I appreciate Director Nelson bringing this to my attention. This item has been kind of in the signature process for quite a while. So what we would need to do here, if this item is approved, is immediately process an amendment to change the payment schedule and basically change the timeline for the project. But because that payment schedule is included in the contract, an amendment would be required in order for us to be able to pay for that work. Because as you mentioned, we couldn't pay at this point for work that happened in FY24. So the amendment, as I understand it, would update the schedule for this project.
I understand that. I'm just not clear about how we got to this point where they did work for us and we weren't in a current contract.
Madam Chair and Councilor Lindell, my understanding is that this particular project has not started yet. Director Nelson, is that correct?
Correct, Director Oster. And if, Councilor, would it help if Rob Del Campo spoke to? No. Okay.
I don't know if it would or not. I'm just trying to figure out, do we owe them the $50,000 or don't we?
Madam Chair, members of the council, no.
Thank you. I'm done.
Okay. Other questions from the committee? Councilor Lee Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With that being said, then does it extend? I mean, because it is confusing. If it says fiscal year, it's on page 6. Compensation excluding Mexico gross receipts tax will follow the payment schedule as follows: FY24, June 30th, 2024, 50,000. But does then that extend the contract to a later date?
Madam Chair, members of the council, my understanding is that by amending the schedule, they are still able to hit their deadlines from the deadline that is presented here within that performance period ending in June of 2026.
Mr. DeCampo, can you speak to that, please?
Yes, I mean, I think the bigger picture here. Oh, sorry, excuse me, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thanks for the opportunity to talk here and give a little bit of insight. I think the bigger picture here is that we've been operating in the community for about almost two years and running a series of cohorts of Northern New Mexico and mainly Santa Fe businesses through our accelerator program. And I believe the city's support is for us to continue on with that. We've had some generous donors in the community that we were able to lean on to support the work as it got started. And we want to just make sure that it continues to go on. So I think we can continue to hit the work will continue and those metrics will continue to get hit if we do continue moving forward. So hopefully that wasn't too confusing, but we'll be continuing to do the work, and just the milestones will continue to get hit as prescribed in the existing contract.
Thank you for the response, but it still seems like there's $50,000 there that is in the contract that we did or did not receive services for. I don't know if we're receiving services or the community is receiving that benefit.
Sure. Yeah, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Yeah, I believe the services are going to continue. That could get tacked on at the end of the contract with the amendment, was my understanding. If that is something that is okay and part of protocol. So the funds would still flow to us, and then the services would happen. It would just kind of tack on to the end as the next group of people that we served, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's just still unclear to me if obviously here it does seem like we received some sort of benefit, and because it is in here for fiscal year 24, it sounds like $50,000 has been what you may have utilized. So I don't know. I'm still confused with it.
Let me see. So when I look at this, it says $50,000 to report on results of first cohort and meet up awareness building events and activities. So what I hear you saying, Mr. Del Campo, is that you all were doing that on your own outside of this contract. What you'll do is for essentially the second cohort, you would charge the city for the second cohort because you've already done the work for the first cohort.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, that's actually a very, very succinct explanation of what we would exactly do. Thank you.
Okay, so you've taken care of the first cohort. There'd be an amendment that comes back. This whole 50,000 would bump to the end of the plan and be spent on a similar meetup awareness building events and activities for the second cohort.
Correct, which would then report back as to the success and the tweaks and such that we would make moving into the third cohort.
Okay.
Madam Chair, then does that mean we cannot vote on this now? Have to wait for an amendment?
Well, we can vote on it knowing that we're going to get an amendment.
Madam Chair, yes, I think the amendment would be necessary in order for the project to begin, because the vendor wouldn't be able to start the work until the amendment was processed.
So do we not approve it tonight?
Can't.
And what does that do to the work that you all are? What does that do to the project? And how long does it take to bring an amendment? A lot of questions there, sorry.
Madam Chair, I think as far as the timeline for processing an amendment, it's possible that could happen by the next meeting.
In January.
I guess a question that I have for Mr. Del Campo. So is this schedule sequential? Would you be able to start on the work that's due, for example, on March 31st with the execution of this part of the contract? If it were executed now, so March 31st, there's a report on cohort progress, development of National Bee Academics Research Community event. Can that be the first activity under this contract?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, yes, that's certainly possible. Sort of shuffling it to line up with the actual dates of the calendar would make sense. Just moving forward, we would be reporting on a different cohort is that biggest difference, I think, with that 50,000 we talked about. So we could start with that deliverable due on the 31st of March could be the first item that we provide to the city. Not a problem.
So Madam Chair and Councilors, then I guess I misspoke. It sounds like this schedule that's in the current version of the contract doesn't necessarily have to start with the work that was originally identified to be done in FY '24. They could start with the work that's identified to be completed by March 31st and then go from there.
Okay, but is it detrimental if we do not approve this tonight and get it fixed? I'm sure it's not ideal, but it's also, it looks like, but as I look at this, there are two other things, September 30th, $33,750, December 30th, $33,750. So it's not just the 50,000 from June. We've got another 66, 67, call it, thousand that is also outlined in here. Yeah, this is tricky.
Madam Chair, members of the council, I'd ask Mr. Del Campo, we would be more than happy to work with staff and his team to amend the schedule and get that back to you. Does that work for you, Mr. Del Campo?
Yeah, that would be fine. I mean, if Madam Chair, members of the committee, John, as long as we, I'm assuming then we could be on the docket for the January meeting and get things pushed through from there. I think that would work fine for us.
Okay, so I guess the next question is, so if we do a contract amendment, I mean, do we table this? We've never had to do this before. Do we table this or, except you can only do that.
Madam Chair.
So,
do we have the ability to amend the agenda at this point in the meeting?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we have to we have to hold it. I don't know if we can hold a contract. All right. I don't know procedurally what we're going to do. So we're going to consult maybe with the city attorney's office and figure out what we're due. But right now we're going to lay this on the table and we'll come back to it because we've got a number of other things to do. And then we'll figure out what exactly we can and should do on this.
Motion to table.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to table this item. I think we need a roll call.
Certainly, Madam Chair. So Councilor Lee Garcia made the motion and it was seconded by Councilor Cassett.
Yes.
Councilor Cassett,
Yes.
Councilor Lindell, Councilor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Romero Worth.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, and
Motion
if
passes.
somebody can consult with the city attorney's office to find out, or whoever we consult with to find out what we do with a contract, whether I just don't know what we do. Can we even hold, I mean, we can hold legislation in a committee. I don't know that we can hold a contract. So we may have to just, I don't know what we do. All right,
Madam Chair, members, thank you.
somebody figure it out. Okay. In the meantime, we're going to go on. Item K, request for approval of purchase agreement with Siden's Fire Apparatus. Hope I said that right. For the purchase of a BME Type 3 Model 34 commercial wildland vehicle in the total amount of $486,350. I mean, $486,350. Sorry, goofed that up. We have with us the chief. Hello, welcome, Chief Moya. Councilor Lindell, you pulled this item.
Good. Hi, Chief. Thanks for showing up tonight.
Problem.
Appreciate it. I just wanted to have a little public conversation about this vehicle. The name of it is a wildland vehicle. It gives me pause. What really gives me pause is that it costs $500,000. And what I want to know is what's our life expectancy of a vehicle like that? How much does it get driven? Who's allowed to drive it? Does the driver of this vehicle have special training These are precious, precious pieces of equipment. And I just want to make sure that our staff knows that we're not going to replace these every couple of years. And if you're out in the wild land, take the less risky route, because this is a very expensive piece of equipment. So enlighten me a little bit about it.
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, yes. So this is a new piece of equipment we're buying. Currently, the Wildland Division has one. And this will be number two. We're able to purchase this to help with the urban interface fires I'm so worried about. And secondly, I'll start with your first question. Yes, they're certified. So in the Wildland Division, we also have engineers that will be driving this. They're specifically designed to basically take care of the truck, make sure it's safe. Secondly, this is in today's modern world, just to be frank, this is the cheaper of the diversions. So I didn't go for the expensive one. So this one, I'm hoping within 3 years will pay for itself. This last year, we brought back about $750,000 to the city with personnel, equipment, sending them out when we're low fire danger. We send these trucks to other parts of the state or outside. We sent them to Oregon this last year, I think Oregon and Montana, and they're able to bring money back to the city. So my ultimate goal is buy something now that will protect the city ultimately, but in the next 2 to 3 years, be able to get the money and bring it back. And basically within 3 years, this truck, it paid for itself. And the other reason, I don't want to scare anybody, but after the Ruidoso fires, I realized we probably need another one of these trucks in here, because I was trying to send trucks to help other local communities, and we can't put away our bigger trucks because we need to protect the city of Santa Fe. So by us purchasing this now, it'll help us long-term get into smaller parts of the city, especially mountainous areas of the department or the city. So that's the bigger picture of what I'm trying to do here, and try to, right now, they're on about a 20-year lifespan. So most of our trucks, our older trucks, we still have them that are about 20 years old in the department. And driven wise, it'll be driven every day. And the goal is when it's low fire season here, I'll try to get it out into other parts of the state or the country to help other people, and we'll start bringing money back and revenue back into the city.
Appreciate it, Chief. Thank you. Move to approve.
We have a motion and a second to approve this item. Do we have any more questions, comments about it? Seeing none, can we get a roll call, please?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Councilor Cassett.
Yes.
Councilor Lindell. Councilor Lee Garcia.
Yes.
Chair Romero Worth.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Okay, do we know what we're going to do with that other thing, or do you want me to keep going here?
Madam Chair, we have a recommendation for the committee's consideration. Would it work to refer the UNM item back to quality of life for the first meeting in January, which would allow us to update the documentation and then bring it back through the council review process with the first cycle in January?
No. So, all right. So first, can we get a motion to take it off the table?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to take this item off the table. We're going to need a roll call. Sorry, while we.
Certainly, Madam Chair. So Councilor Cassett made the motion to take it off the table, and Councilor Lee Garcia made the second on that. Councilor Cassett.
Yes.
Councilor Lindell. Councilor Lee Garcia.
Yes.
Chair Romero Worth.
Yes. Okay. So now it's in front of us. You're recommending that we refer it back to quality of life. That's the only committee it came to prior to this. And then you'll amend it there. Well, I don't think you can amend a contract though. You'll have a contract amendment prepared for that committee.
Well, and Madam Chair, because this contract has not been executed, we would just basically update the documentation that we brought forward so we would
Okay.
change the contract to reflect the updated payment schedule prior to consideration by Quality of Life.
All right. Is there a motion to move this back to quality of life?
A motion to,
An updated payment schedule?
move this back to quality of life on, Wednesday, January 8th. Do I need to say when it comes back here? Okay. Refer to quality of life meeting on Wednesday, January 8th. Moved.
Second.
To get an updated payment schedule.
Yes, thank you,
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Can we get a roll call?
Certainly. Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell, Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Romero Worth.
Yes.
Motion passes. So item H on tonight's agenda has been referred back to Quality of Life to the January 8th meeting.
Okay. Item V, request for approval of amendment number 1 to item 23-0328 with Community Solutions doing business as Vincent's Legacy LLC to extend the term through June 30th, 2025 for capital improvements and unit upgrades at Santa Fe Suites. We have Johanna Nelson, our interim director of Office of Affordable Housing. And Councilor Lindell, you pulled this item.
Trying to get it pulled up here. Bear with me. Thank you. So a couple of questions on this. When we did this project, Santa Fe Suites, did we do a sizable capital improvements on it?
Madam Chair, members of the council, we did. There were 2 awards made via the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And I do want to acknowledge Dave Foster with the organization is online too.
So I think with this, I don't know what we're funding. I don't know what the capital improvements are. I don't know. This is for $1 million. I don't know what the capital improvements are that are needed for $1 million that we didn't do initially, and what those costs are to be for those. It doesn't call out anything about what those improvements are. And it also doesn't call out who's overseeing the approval of this work and the costs associated. And one of the problems with it for me, I think, is that the contractor on this is the group out in New York, correct?
Madam Chair, members of the council, correct. The entity is Community Solutions and the local entity is Vincent's Legacy.
And this says it cannot be subcontracted. That's in here. So how does that work? That they're the contractor, but I don't see anything in here about them hiring local licensed contractors. And I don't see anything about what the capital improvements are, what any projected costs, and anyone overseeing the bidding, the approval, and the associated costs.
Madam Chair, members of the council.
Director Nelson, do you mind if I chime in here? Madam Chair and Councilor Lindell, this is a term extension which only extends the term of the original agreement. The original agreement begins on page 7 of the packet, and there is a scope of work which discusses capital upgrade activities, which include replacement of fire alarm systems, hot water heaters, parking lots. So I just wanted to draw your attention to that original agreement that may answer some of the questions about what this funding was for.
thank you. But it still begs the question for me, why those weren't completed.
Madam Chair and Councillor Lindell, I have a little bit of information from Community Solutions about that. I understand that they ran into some permitting delays with regard to a fence for the Santa Fe Suites property, and there were other delays with the project. So this agreement, as it is currently written, is scheduled to expire at the end of this month, is my understanding. And this proposed amendment would extend the term for this grant to, let's see, June 30th of 2025 to allow the contractor additional time to complete the work.
Do you know what the balance is remaining?
Madam Chair and Councillor Lindell, I do not. I don't know if.
Madam
Director
Chair,
Johnson-
I believe they have spent expended about 250 on this contract. And they've provided us with a schedule to be able to hit that deadline of completion by the summer that Director Oster mentioned.
Do you know what is included in the expenditures that are to be completed by June 30th?
Madam Chair, members of the council, yes. And so those are, and I'm happy if you'd like for Dave to provide more detail, but those are renovations specifically on kitchen units and then the building of a fence, as well as some construction elements that Director Oster mentioned, like the fire alarm. There's asphalt, stucco repair, minor construction.
I'm happy to.
Yeah, I was going to say, we do have Community Solutions representative on the Zoom if you want more details. I would, this facility is in my district, and I can tell you that that fence is very, very important. So I just,
I
yeah,
don't have any problem. with
Yeah,
it. I'm
you're
just
just-
trying to find out what
what
we're
we're doing.
spending this money on.
yeah. So it's Mr. Foster, correct? Do you have more information to help us out here?
Sure, Madam Chair and members of council. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to be with you here tonight, and certainly understand the concern. The bulk of the money that remains to be spent is really on two items. It's on a fence to surround the perimeter of the campus, and it's on additional unit upgrades. The reason for the expenditure, and we don't like it any more than you do. We really would like to be done with all of this work by now and have the property in the condition that we want to have it in, and we've been working very hard to do that. Are really twofold. The first is that really within the last, let's say, 6 or 8 months, we have heard concerns articulated by the community as part of a broader Cerrillos Road strategy and other efforts in the community that said, let's get a perimeter fence around this property. Originally, there was an idea of maybe putting a perimeter fence around the whole of the shopping center, but essentially there's cross traffic from the arroyo that sits behind us over to the train stop, and some concern that whether any of that traffic is being prompted at all by easy access to the Santa Fe Suites. And so the idea of the fence came up. We said, great, let's redirect a portion of this grant to do that, to meet the needs that we're hearing from the community as what's required. We went out, we did the drawings, we got that put together. The city itself, for a period of 3 months, didn't have the ability to issue a purchase order. And so that was, I think, July, August, September, more or less. And so we got set back there, but we are also still waiting on the permit for the fence. So the fence was an adjustment in response to community requests to make sure that fence was there. We want to be responsive to the community. We want to adjust the plan to do that. And that's part of it. That's a big chunk of what is in the remaining funds to be spent. The other piece of it is unit renovations, which is something that we've pledged from the beginning. What has been more of a challenge than we expected, although we're well through the units at this point, is that the population at the property because of some of the challenges that they are facing, have been less willing, less able, less flexible to be able to sort of temporarily relocate out of their units and allow us to go in what would be standard renovation timeframe, where we could relocate somebody for a couple of days, finish the renovation, and move them back. We've addressed this. We're moving on track, but again, the same challenge of the purchase order meant that we had to demobilize our crews. We can remobilize them now. They are up and moving. We feel very confident in the June 30 deadline. This is really just an extension, but on a scope of work for those two reasons of adjustment.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Is there a motion? I'd move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve this item. If there's no further discussion, can we get a roll call, please?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Romero Worth.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you all for
Thank you,
being here
Madam Chair.
tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks for hanging with us, Mr. Foster. Okay. I think we are on to our last three. Oh, no, we're not. 5. Okay, but we're going to take 3 together. Because I think, well, we're going to have to take them one at a time when we approve them, but we're going to do X, Y, and Z requests. So X is request for approval of a professional services contract with Capital Program Management Services LLC, not to exceed $4,327,500. Geez, I don't know why tonight I'm not messing these up. $4,327,500, including NMGRT for on-call project management services for a 4-year term. Item Y, request for approval of a professional services contract with Wilson and Company not to exceed $4,327,500, including NMGRT for an on-call project management services for a 4-year term. And then finally, Z, request for approval of professional services contract with Leroy N. Pacheco not to exceed $4,327,500, including NMGRT for an on-call contract or on-call project management services for a 4-year term. So we will vote on each of these independently, but I believe they're all related. So just so we have them all in front of us. Counselor Lindell, I think you pulled this, and Counselor Cassett, I think you did too.
Thank you, Chair. So thanks for being here, Ms. Wheeler. We had a little preliminary discussion about this. And my issue with this is bothers me a little bit that we do these contracts for so much money over 4 years. I'd be a little bit more comfortable with it if it was 2 years. And then we reevaluated. I realize they're on call and that you do them as needed. The other problem was that for me, the packet was incomplete in that I didn't have any idea what the expertise or capabilities of each one of these contractors were. Additionally, I had no idea if I had no way of comparing apples to apples. What was the cost per hour for each one of these contractors to perform, whether it's design work or engineering work or whatever? We got that, I think, after we were in the room or 5 minutes before we were in the room here. So that's what really prompted me to pull this. And I think we need that in our packets, because in a way we don't know what we're approving. But you know, I'm going to support this, but I'm also, I don't love the idea of doing these for 4 years for $4 million. So that's where I'm at with this. And I think we can do better in the future with the packets. And I don't think that I'm directing that to you. Thank you.
Counselor Cassett.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director Wheeler. I think my concerns are definitely of a similar vein. I understand that, we have project managers on staff. I know that we do not have enough. I don't know if we have vacancies in that right now. But I'm just looking at $13 million over the next 4 years to contract for project managers. Now, similar to Councilor Lindell, understanding the expertise, because I do know that there are some projects where we are going to need to bring in an outside project manager that has a specific skill set for that project. But I am just not clear on when and where and why and how. I do also know that we have a lot of capital dollars that we have to get out the door. And I'm guessing that is part of it. So I think getting some more information, and Councilor Lindell, you said something came in right before where is it? Where did it come to?
Came into email. It was from Slovato, I believe.
Okay. Oh, I was wondering what those were. Thank you.
See it?
Yep, I found them. I didn't realize they were attached to this. Thank you. That clears that up. But so Director Wheeler, I would like to hear just a little bit more about when we utilize these as opposed to when we utilize staff, and are these things that we would otherwise be utilizing staff for if we had more?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, Councilor Cassett, and Councilor Lindell for your questions. Yes, these 3 contracts are all the result of an RFP process, which was started in March of this year. This was in response to the incredible success of bringing in grant money for capital projects that not a meeting goes by that the governing body isn't approving grant money that we're bringing in for capital projects. And we had a banner year last year at the legislature with $20 million appropriated in 1 year. More than half of those projects haven't even started. So we do have vacancies in project management. About 50% of our project management positions are vacant and have been for some time. We did just complete a reclassification with the help of Human Resources to change the name from project administrator to project manager, which will really help us in recruiting. Because there are things in construction projects that are the administrators, and they're the ones that are inside all the time, and they only process the invoices and that kind of thing. Our project managers do a project from cradle to grave, right? From the very beginning, they do this procurement, they oversee the construction. We have, even if we were fully staffed, which we're not, we're about 50% staffed, and we are recruiting hard right now to fill those positions with our new classification title. We hope that the pay doesn't continue to be a barrier, because we did ask for a pay increase, but didn't get it. So we hope that the pay doesn't continue to be a barrier. But what this allows us to do, we must have on-call professional services so that our project managers can say, I can handle this many projects that I'm doing myself. Many of our project managers are managing 10 projects. And then they can add more projects to that by having a project manager under contract to do the day-to-day on that project, but oversee them. So our project managers are always involved. I'm always involved. Our division directors are always involved. Our division directors manage some projects. I'm managing projects. For instance, I'm managing Midtown with the help of consultants. So we are using all the different versions that are the best solution for each project, because our priority really is to leverage all these fantastic dollars for improvements in the community. And the community, most of these dollars have an expiration date. So, and many of them expire within the next 3 years. And so it's really important. That's why we undertook the RFP. That's why we're engaging these services at $1 million a year of services in case we need to. We don't know which ones of these contractors will be the perfect fit each time. How we proceed when it is time to bring in professional services is we take all of our, a few of our on-call companies, we take a look at their expertise, which is the best fit, and then we usually ask for multiple quotes. We just did that on Midtown. We asked for 3 quotes for the phase 1 design of Midtown, because that's a big piece of work. So we, and what was really interesting about that, and we'll probably see more of this over time, is that we're not the only ones with a lot of capital dollars in the state. Lots of cities have them, and 2 of the 3 companies declined to bid. So it's really, that's the other reason we have sort of the layers of dollars and services available. We always only spend money that we need to spend, and we always only spend money that the governing body has appropriated for a particular project. So we can't adjust the budget. We can never issue a purchase order against these contracts with anything other than money that the governing bodies approve for a project. So that's what we're doing. We use our in-house project managers use these services to expand their capacity and ability to deliver all these capital projects.
Okay, thank you for that. Definitely appreciate the additional information. And I'll take a chance to take a look at Ms. Lovato's email. I also will be supporting these, but similar to Councilor Lindell, they're big contracts. I do understand needing to have them. I'm hoping that, we'll have some success with that change. I know that applying for government jobs is a little bit of a challenge because people don't know that you need to basically plagiarize a job description. So if anybody's listening, you can't do your own version. I know we've been told not to plagiarize, but really, they match them. So hopefully with that change, that will assist us in getting some more individuals in there and not having to utilize these as much. But it is important we get those dollars out the door. So thank you for the additional information. And I also will see what Ms. Lovato sent. Yield the floor.
Other questions from the committee? Okay, we're going to take these one at a time. Get back to where we were. So we'll start with X, request for approval of a professional services contract with Capital Program Management Services LLC, not to exceed $4,327,500, including NMGRT for an on-call project management services for a 4-year term.
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? Seeing none, can we get a roll call?
Certainly. Councilor Cassett,
Yes.
Councilor Lindell, Councilor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Romero Worth.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, on to item Y, request for approval of a professional services contract with Wilson and Company not to exceed $4,327,500, including NMGRT, for an on-call project management services for a 4-year term.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve this item. Any further discussion? Seeing none, can we get a roll call, please?
Certainly. Councilor Cassett,
Yes.
Councilor Lindell, Councilor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Romero Worth.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, and finally, item Z, request for approval of a professional services contract with Leroy N. Pacheco, not to exceed $4,327,500, including NMGRT for an on-call project management services for a 4-year term.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion and a second. Did you get that, Director Oster? It was sort of a tie. Pick who you want.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Motion and a second to approve this item. Any further conversation? Seeing none, can we get a roll call?
Certainly, Madam Chair, and I have the motion from Councilor Lindell and the second from Councilor Cassett. Councilor Cassett,
Yes.
Councilor Lindell, Councilor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Romero Worth.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Okay, we've got 2 more items. We're going to go to item, I believe it's DD, correct? A, B, C, D, D. Okay. Request for approval of amendment number 2 to item 23-0548, exclusive negotiation agreement with Santa Fe Art Institute to extend the term through April 30th, 2025, to negotiate terms for land and building disposition and development of the Midtown Visual Arts Center pursuant to the city's request for proposals. We have Daniel Hernandez, our Metropolitan Redevelopment Agency Director, and other guests as needed. And Councilor Lindell, I believe you pulled this, correct? All right, Councilor Lindell.
Thank you for being here. So this is our second extension, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, why do we need this?
Um, the SFAI MATA team recently completed all of their deliverables on the ENA. And so we are needing an extension in order to begin negotiating the terms for the disposition and development agreement. So once if the council, if the governing body approves the extension, then we'll immediately move into the DDA negotiations.
What is that?
Well, during their due diligence period under the exclusive negotiation agreement, we gave them the exclusive rights to put all their plans together, do the building assessments, at the beginning, organize their team, put a capital campaign together. And as you'll hear in a little while, they started their capital campaign. The sort of the first phase of a typical capital campaign is kind of just meeting with donors and understanding their desires and level of commitment to funding the project. So they undertook all that work, including operating budgets, development schedules, and a phasing plan as well.
So it's needed a second. What's been the piece of this that has held us up?
I would rather have Jamie answer that question, but it was a matter of just coordinating a lot of the team at the very beginning, getting under contract, and negotiating the terms of their arrangements with their consulting team. Also doing the building assessments and getting the information back and organizing it. That work takes a long time, having been on the development side of projects like this.
So our original time frame wasn't realistic.
Well, we thought it was, but again, project management and development processes often take longer than what is anticipated. So everyone tries to go for what seems realistic at the beginning, but it seems as though that they've actually, as you'll see in a little while, hopefully we'll have a chance to have their presentation. They've done a lot of professional work that really updates the council, this committee, on all the work that they've done since we started the exclusive negotiation agreement period.
So let me go ahead and say that I have massive heartburn of doing a 50-year, $1 a year lease. I think it's unfair for us to bind future councils for 50 years. I think it's, I don't think it's fiscally responsible for us. And, 10 years and then take another look, maybe, but 50 years at $1 a year, I think is very, very, very unfair to future councils. So let me preface by saying that so that I'm clear about it. And I had asked for some information about the fundraising, and probably I'm better to ask people from SFAI rather than you about this, Mr. Hernandez.
Shall I turn it over to you?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Jamie?
Good evening. Thank
Hi.
you so much. This is nice to provide an update. I'm Jamie Blosser. I'm the Executive Director at the Santa Fe Art Institute. As of January, I will be the Director of the Midtown Arts and Design Alliance. And I'm happy to sort of jump in, Chair and Councilor Lindell, to some of the questions that you've posited. I can also answer some of them by going through the presentation, but just to respond to the two issues that you bring up. One of the reasons for the extension that was needed, we did provide all of the materials before this extension of December 31st, but as Daniel said, we do need time. We have not started to negotiate the DDA. Part of that is also looking at the infrastructure and the fact that Wilson is still onboarding, I believe, and we need to really work that out and can't do that until they're on board. But the big reason, frankly, was that there was a $9 million delta in our original projections in our RFP that we submitted. And that was due to the fact that when we did the conditions assessments and our due diligence, we saw that there is over $4 million needed that was unexpected in the HVAC and plumbing of the Visual Arts Center buildings since the last 6 years. And so that was not fully expected in our original assessment. We also learned, unfortunately, that not only our project, but the entire Midtown site census tract is no longer eligible for new market tax credits, which is a huge blow. And that was a $5 million sort of hiccup that we needed to really assess and feel good about the feasibility of that additional $9 million delta moving forward on the project. And so, yes, it's taken a little more time to do that. But we do feel very confident in the feasibility. At this time, we wouldn't be in front of you if we hadn't, because, you know, this work has also cost money. We've spent over $400,000 to date on the due diligence needed to make sure that we feel confident about the project. And in terms of the length of the proposed ground lease and $1 a year, the $1 a year, of course, is that the community benefits of this project are significant. And this is one of 3 buildings on the Midtown site that were designated for community purpose. The operations, the income will not support a significant payback to any landlord. Really, we're looking at a sliding scale of rent so that that rent can go to paying the operating expenses and any debt service that the development project incurs. The idea is that space is very expensive, as we all know, in Santa Fe, and we are looking to provide long-term affordability to mission-based organizations that provide a significant community positive impact to our community, and really to ensure that our local nonprofit sector can be supported through that. And so the other aspect is that only 66% of the space in these buildings are leasable. The Visual Arts Center buildings were built as educational buildings, and we are repurposing those academic buildings. They were not built as commercial buildings. And so anyone even looking at it as a market rate perspective would have a hard time doing that. And then, of course, the term of the lease is that we will be taking out loans. They will have terms well beyond 10 years, probably 30-year terms. Low interest loans. And also the philanthropy community does not want to provide $15 million of projected philanthropy to see that turn over so quickly. They are looking typically more at a legacy situation, especially if there's any naming rights to the building, which of course we would discuss with the city and that approval. So that's really what we're looking at in terms of the longer term lease, is this just to meet the needs of the $25 million, $20 to $25 million that we're expecting to have to raise for the project. But I'm also happy to go through any specific details because we do have quite a bit of financial information in the presentation, if that's helpful.
Let me just ask you specifically. I got some information. I requested information. I realize that we're talking about an extension here. Okay, I get that. And I really don't have a problem with an extension, but I haven't really had an opportunity to ask other questions on this. So I'm taking the opportunity now. So you have a $4 million from Grow America Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. Is that a loan?
Yes, and I think that some of this was discussed in an earlier presentation. That is a low interest loan. What that is that Grow America they have a $2 billion public-private partnership portfolio, and they are part of a group of CDFI funders who have been approved to access some of the Inflation Reduction Act money. And so the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Loan Fund is looking for shovel-ready projects, basically to be able to use that money as a loan. The terms of those loans are being figured out end of this year, and there are also some of it could be forgiven. It's really just they're all trying to figure out what these sort of loan products are going to be looking like in the new year. Of course, given the federal administration coming in, there's also a lot of conversation about the Inflation Reduction Act and what might happen with that. And we've had excellent conversations with Grow America, who have been talking to leaders in the field. And there's two things that we feel very confident about related to any access to those loan funds through the IRA. And the first one is that those have been moved out of Treasury. They are sitting in Citibank, and so it would be very difficult to sort of actually claw back that money. I don't know if that's even ever been done before. And the other reason is that a significant portion of those funds are going to red states, and especially given the slim House majority federally, they're not going to want to have to stop those projects in their states. And so there's actually a lot of conversation that there will be things that obviously shift significantly regarding the IRA, but not necessarily related to these specific funds.
I'm just looking at a chart that I got from Mr. Hernandez, and it may be in your presentation also. But I'm not sure that it's correct where I see the name and source of contributing to total development costs, the amounts that it says $8 million has been pledged. I don't know that it's proper to consider loans as part of money pledged. Is that I don't work in the arena that you're in. Are loans considered money pledged?
Chair, Councilor Lindell, our entire sources and uses budget, and we could get that on this screen for the purposes of this conversation. I don't know how to move anything. But the entire sources and uses, we have a significant amount of escalation costs in there. In fact, I'd like to maybe pause here and talk about the numbers. If we could go to, yeah, it looks like a spreadsheet. Thank you. Next one, I believe. Yeah, there. So we've done significant work on the cost estimate. Right now, the cost estimate includes multiple contingencies. This is a very conservative number. It includes a design contingency, an estimating contingency. It includes escalation contingencies, soft cost contingencies as well. And so what you see in the blue is that given our proposed phasing of what it looks like right now, we will see construction costs escalate. And so obviously, the sooner that we can raise the money, the better. But right now, those are looking like $19 million, which is coming out at between $250 to $450 a square foot, which is still less than new construction right now. You could go to the next slide, please.
Somewhere $25 million project.
That's correct, and I'm getting there, Councilor Lindell. These are just the hard costs. If you could keep going to the sources and uses. Nope, here we are. So you can see that this page reflects a lot of leveraging of sources, and this is typical for a development project of this scale, and it is something that we seek to make sure that we're leveraging our philanthropic sources. That we're really shooting for 15 million from the philanthropic community, but we're leveraging that with as much as we possibly can. And so what you see here is that $4 million of the loan is part of the leveraging, and because we can support that with the operating income, we can support the debt service. So right now, that 8 million is about 1/3 of our total projected budget. So absolutely, it is critical to demonstrate to you that we have these preliminary letters of interest and in these loans, because that is a part of our overall $24 million budget.
Right, but what I'm seeing is that $4 million currently is a loan, and you have another loan from the same group at 3.5 million at 7%, which is not a great rate. And that the SFAI board has committed $380 5,000, that's also a loan.
Counselor Lindell, I don't know where the 7% is, but these are low interest loans. So the total,
It's in the letter that I saw, from, is it called Grow America?
we have two loans that are the two letters. One is for the $4 million Greenhouse Gas Reduction Loan Fund. That is permanent financing to the project for $4 million. That is the only amount that I've included. We've raised a commitment of $4 million in philanthropy and $4 million in loans, totaling $8 million. I have not included the second loan from Grow America, which would be the bridge loan, which is a higher interest rate because that's a temporary loan. It's really used as a line of credit during construction to make sure that cash flow continues and we don't have to have any work stoppages. So I'm not including that $3.5 million bridge loan in that total $8 million.
Right, I'm still, the $8 million, I guess we do business differently. I see that you have some donors that have given some significant amounts, but I don't really consider those loans, because they do have to be paid back, as doesn't matter what I consider it. Why don't you go ahead and proceed? I'm just saying that, this isn't all quite as clear as $8 million committed to the project and in the bank and ready to go, to meet the timeline that we're all trying to meet right now.
Chair Romero Worth, Counselor Lindell, this is always sort of a chicken and egg. We've done a really great fundraising feasibility analysis, and if you could go to I was just going to go to that, but I can't. Oh, okay. Will do. So the next slide, please. So as you know, this is the phase 1 of the entire property. And next slide.
Let me just interrupt for a second. Has everyone else seen this presentation but me?
Oh, I mean, I've met with our presenters, but I don't know if this has changed from what we talked about. But why don't you go through it really quickly, realizing it's late and
Sure, this is our project
still have
boundary.
another
It's
item.
4 acres on the north side of the property. Next. This is our development team. These are the folks that are helping us with our fundraising and financing strategies, as well as our architecture and renewable energy team. Next. We have letters of intent with all of these 11 partners, 12 including the Santa Fe Art Institute. They are all either fully planning to move their operations here or partially move their operations here. And we will continue to, as we move through the project, we will continue to balance mission and the bottom line as we work with other potential organizations who would be interested to be here as well. Next. Much of the work that we're doing with the Midtown Arts and Design Alliance is based on the Midtown Engagement Partnership work that was conducted in 2020 and 2021. And SFAI and 5 out of 9 of those Midtown Engagement Partners are currently a part of the Midtown Arts and Design Alliance as potential tenant partners. And we really see this as mission-based because the work that we all did together made it into the community development plan that you all at the governing body level approved. And so we're using this moving forward. Next slide. The focus that we're all trying to really achieve here is accessible all ages community arts and cultural programming. The next slide. We have 3 Indigenous-led organizations I believe that they will all be in the first phase, which is really exciting. And so we're wanting to balance cultural heritage with new media, creative technology, provide a lot of internships and classes and programs around with cultural entrepreneurs, creative technology entrepreneurs next. Huge focus of this and a lot of the community benefits that you'll see have to do with the fact that all of these organizations provide education at some level, training and leadership development. And we really see this as capacity building for the nonprofit sector because we're working with small and larger organizations, and there's a lot of mentorship on this project, especially as we'll be sharing resources and sharing spaces. Next. There's a significant amount of work, as Daniel said, that we've done. And the highlights of that is that we now have a really clear understanding of building and site conditions. We've done preliminary space planning. We'll understand the scope of work. We've gotten preliminary cost estimates, LOIs from all the tenants. We have, I think, a very robust community development plan. And we have these $8 million in commitments, which is a third of the project. And I think that is significant, given that we're just finished with the feasibility phase. So I'm pretty excited about the prospects moving forward. Next. This goes into some due diligence. As I said, the HVAC needs of the Visual Arts Center are not insignificant and they were unexpected. But the good news is that the barracks, which what we're talking about is the last of the World War II military barracks on the property. As you probably know, there were over 200 of them. The great news is that the roof and the structure of those are in great condition. And so we do have some asbestos and lead remediation to do, but we're excited about being able to move forward on this. Next. These are some of the space uses. I won't spend a lot of time here, but as I noted, it's about 66% leasable space, repurposing these academic buildings for this use. Next. We've started some preliminary infrastructure studies, but we really need to work with Wilson and the MRA more fully on board, once they're on board, to understand more about this. We do know that this side of the property has all functioning utilities, and so this project is not dependent on the completion of the infrastructure construction in order to move forward, which is great news. Next. Next. As I said, this is our operating, estimated operating expenses. We're looking to make sure that we can achieve long-term affordability with below market rate rent. And I covered the 50-year and $1 a year, so we can move forward. The next slide. We have a lot of significant benefits with economic, equity, environmental, and cultural benefits. We expect to have over 250 jobs for local residents on the site, internships and apprenticeships and for over 450 youth, and going all electric and with photovoltaic panels. Again, building nonprofit capacity, I think especially moving forward in the next 2 to 4 years, we are going to need to see that more and more to make sure that in our own community, those that are providing those community services can have some long-term affordability as well. And this is also a project that is strongly investing in cultural entrepreneurship and growing the creative economy. Next slide. Next. Our phasing plan is looking at starting construction in 2026. We'll have some significant approvals to go through with all of the phases, including going to the MRA, going to land use, and of course, getting building permits. And so we are hoping to start with the dark blue at the top, which is currently the Marion Center, and also Tipton Hall, which is a lecture hall that we will also be able to have for not just the partners use on the site, but community use. And then depending on, of course, how the funding comes in, we would complete the Visual Arts Center and then move toward the barracks and complete the site work. And that, hopefully, if we're successful with the fundraising, that's 2028.
Go to the previous slide, please, the preliminary estimate of construction costs. Thank you. So on that, we have year 2024. Was the plan that 2024 was going to see construction in the amount of 14 million?
Chair Romero Worth, Councilor Lindell, the year 2024 is the year the estimate was done. And so that was basically the costs as of January of this year that we did the estimate. So that's why we had to put in these escalation costs. And so our estimators projected those percentages by year moving forward. Of course, these are all projections based on their knowledge and what they're looking at with the construction market.
Okay, thank you.
Next. 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 So I think I covered everything on this page. I'm happy to come back to this if needed. Next slide. And thank goodness we have a great team. We have done extensive interviews with potential funders, and they're all very eager to see things happening in Midtown. These are some of their most exciting points to raise. And I think that what's important to point out is that just as you all are wanting to see movement on the site, they are also wanting to see movement on the site. And so that kind of sort of having the city of Santa Fe as a trusted partner is a really critical aspect of being able to raise money for the project. And next slide. This is a crazy slide and I apologize, but I should not have put the entire timeline on here, but hopefully again, we're starting construction in 2026. And if we're successful at fundraising, we really hope to be moving in by the end of 2028. Thank you.
I'll yield the floor, Chair.
Other questions from the committee? Councilor Cassett.
Thanks so much, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for being here, Jamie. So I know that right now we're voting on an extension, but I think that this was actually a very useful conversation for what I know I would like to see when we do actually, move forward with discussing a plan and what the proposal is. I think understanding, as Councilor Lindell pointed out, a lot of the fundraising. So these different loans and what are their interest rates and how much of them do you expect to use? And maybe by that point, we'll have a bit more understanding of whether some of these loans will become grants. I know that would really be useful. I know also that this was one of the areas of the property that we discussed was going to be highly community benefit. So really, I see that there's on, slide 17, you've laid out these different benefits. I think really digging into those, we've probably learned some as well from our conversation around aspect of what I would like to see and how how we really expect the community to, lack of a better word, benefit from this, but what are the different utilizations, your different partners? I know that I would really like to hear from them. You mentioned some of them are looking at moving total operations, some partial. What does that mean? What does that look like? So I think when we actually get to discussing a lease agreement, essentially, a disposition agreement that this would, or not disposition, we are not disposing of this one, leasing, that having a lot of this very much more fleshed out for us will be really wonderful, as well as, what that fundraising looks like. I believe that you mentioned that you are aren't you working with some individuals that are supposed to help with the fundraising plan? And I think you just already mentioned them, but hearing a little bit more would be helpful.
Sure. Chair Romero Worth, Councilor Cassett. One of the slides showed our development team, and one of those folks is Serafina Consulting, and they're basically our fundraising consultant on the philanthropy side, and that's Emily DeAngelis.
Okay, and would they potentially be here when we have these larger discussions? Because I know that there's going to be more you're not going to have the fundraising done by April 2025. So understanding how those are met, as well as what happens if those aren't met. And of course, Daniel, I know that that's going to be something that you're really going to be focusing on. When you say low interest loans, what are the interest rates of those loans at this time?
That is unknown, but what we're talking about and what we have in our pro forma is 2.5%.
Okay.
2.5% to 4%.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I think, I'm fine with an extension. I think that there's still a lot of questions, and I'm glad that we had this conversation because I think it's really helpful to have this conversation now instead of in April. And hopefully that can be beneficial when we get there. So I will go ahead and yield the floor for now. Thank you.
Counselor Lee Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this looks like a 5-year projection. Is that what I'm seeing in the presentation, actually?
Councilor Garcia, yes, 4 years.
4 years. And yeah, I mean, the concerns are it's the fundraising effort seems to be a tremendously heavy lift. I mean, best of luck to you all for that, because it looks like, what the benefit of this in the future for our community is tremendous, and it'd be great. But I see the concerns of my colleagues, and yeah, I mean, I'm supporting this, but what happens in the case that you can't gather the funding for this? I mean, does this, and this may be for you or Mr. Hernandez, do we stop and say, hey, we got to pivot? I mean, what happens?
Yes, Councilor Garcia, that is something that my board and I will constantly be evaluating, especially before we come before you again with a request for a DDA. We do expect to achieve our goals when we come before you with a request for DDA for phase 1. And so I think the bigger question is, what if all the phases cannot happen? And that is something that we will be assessing as we move forward.
It's a great question. And typically what happens in a development or a lease agreement like this is that we would, since it's a phased project, we wouldn't allow a closing on the next phase until they demonstrate that the financing is in place to do that next phase. And we'd put time parameters around that for performance.
Thank you. No further questions.
I just have one. The ground lease of $1 for 50 years applies to whom? The Midtown Arts and Design Alliance, to you all?
Chair Romero-Worth, yes, that would be the MATA LLC.
Okay, and that doesn't preclude you from, you have tenant partners. They presumably would pay something to be there, I would think. They're not part of the $1.
Correct. Chair Romero-Worth, what our operating model looks like is that the operating expenses that we showed, that is what rent will pay for that and any debt service. And so we would have subleases to the tenant partners between, what we're looking at right now is between $12 and $18 a square foot. Of course, that will change as we move forward, but we are looking to stay below market rate. And as I said, there are smaller and larger organizations and smaller and larger capacity to pay that rent. And that's what we're looking at too, is how do we determine that sliding scale that's equitable?
Okay, and I think we're living in uncertain times, and so probably really important to think about, the phasing of this in ways that, I mean, obviously you want it to build over time, but we don't really know what over time means. And so what's achievable, what can we get done, what may have to wait, what may change. I'm sure that's the way these kinds of big projects are approached anyway, but yeah, the world is a tricky place at the moment.
You, Chair Romero-Worth, and agreed. And I think that one of our first goals in the new year, should our extension be approved, is to actually get a construction manager at risk on board so that we can really look at these numbers and see if they're overly conservative and if we can move forward, you know, with a little bit more reassurance about that moving forward, knowing that, as you say, everything actually is an unknown coming into the new year, which is, I think, even more reason, hopefully, that the Santa Fe community can really make this investment in the nonprofit sector, which I think this project is.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions from the committee? We have a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and second to approve this item. Director Oster. Did you get the motion in the second? Counselor Cassett was the motion. Counselor Lee Garcia was the second. And then we need a roll call.
My apologies, Madam Chair.
No worries.
Okay, Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell, Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Romero Worth,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight, for staying late. Okay, our last item, KK, a bill approving the sale of city-owned buildings, improvements, and 6 parcels located at 1600 St. Michael's Drive within the city and county of Santa Fe. Aspect QOZB LLC in 3 phases for the total of $5 million. This is consideration of Bill 2024-19. And we have Daniel Hernandez here as well as others as needed for, and Daniel, of course, is the Metropolitan Redevelopment Agency Director. And I think, Councilor Lindell, you pulled this.
I did pull this, and I think that this is going to have it doesn't matter how much we discuss it in committee at this point. It's going to have a very long conversation 2 nights from now, and I'm not inclined to have the conversation twice. So depending on if my colleagues have questions that they want to ask, I'm happy to make a motion at this point.
Comments on this? Sounds like your motion is in order.
Sounds like what?
It sounds like your motion is in order.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve this item. Any comments, questions, thoughts? Counselor Cassett?
I would just say that I agree with Counselor Lindell. This is going to have a robust conversation on Wednesday. And I know that we've already had very robust conversations in committee. And so thank you for that efficiency.
Yeah, I would only say I'm sorry that we made you all stay along with us.
No, it's our pleasures, but
Sorry. Okay. Motion and a second. No further comments, discussion. Director Oster, if you could call the roll.
Sure, Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell, Counselor Lee Garcia,
No, I'll extend my vote.
and Chair Romero Worth.
Yes. Okay.
Motion.
I'm sorry. Counselor Lee Garcia to explain his vote.
Just a quick explanation, and I'm in support of development, and I really would like to see this going forward, and I think that the discussion at governing body in a couple nights will maybe we can hash a few of these things out. I just we'll save my questions for 2 nights from now. But I just feel that there's a gap in between the appraisals, and I think that there's a lot of extra seed income that we're needing for Midtown development for the future, and I think we could have done a little bit better. And that's the reason for my no vote. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right. With that, we're done with the consent agenda. We have introduction of legislation. Counselor Lindell, did you want to introduce your?
Oh, sure. It's a resolution approving a public fireworks display during the Santa Fe Plaza 2024-2025 New Year's Eve event. So we typically have fireworks on the plaza on New Year's Eve, and this is going to allow us to have that.
Okay, so that is introduced. We have a couple more things, matters from staff,
Madam Chair, none at this time.
matters from the committee, matters from the chair. Thank you all for your work tonight. Last meeting of the year, we capped it off in style. Our next meeting is Monday, January 13th. We'll see you all tomorrow and the next day. We're adjourned.